till he can do it in his sleep. And the fact that he did not have those answers at his fingertips lets me know categorically he was not properly prepared for this debate.
Well, they say they coached him on all of those issues. So,
and that he had extensive debate prep with real mock debates, with his aides playing all the roles of all the people.
Listen, this was a disaster for Bloomberg.
Andrew, let me come back to you. There's a difference, and you guys know this very well, between being prepped and accepting the preparation. Do you believe that Bloomberg doesn't know how to answer these questions or doesn't accept what his team wants the answers to be? There's a meaningful distinction.
There really is a distinction, Chris, and it's very apt because you can only be coached if you're willing to be coached. I mean, everyone who works for Bloomberg works for Bloomberg. So there's no one that could be like, hey, Mike, like you have to yeah, that was terrible. You have to do it again. We're going to videotape you and show it to you.
Did that happen with you?
Not let him. Yes, that happened to me. And then you don't let the person leave the room. And the people who are working with me worked for me too, but they knew that I was coachable. Like if they were like, hey, Yang, that was not great. Here, we'll show it to you. Let's do it again. Then I'd be like, all right, let's do it again. And there were times I did not want to be there at all. But in Mike's case, if he didn't want to be there, he's not going to be there. You know what I mean? There's no one on his team who can be like, that was terrible. This is going to potentially damage your campaign to a very, very high degree. And you need to not, and I know this is the case because I saw him on stage. If you get the obvious question and you don't pivot to this memorized script that your team has hammered into you, then you just did not get prepared or you were not willing to prepare yourself.
He did, but he wasn't ready for the follow-up.
But I have to tell you something. You have to think about it in terms of willingness versus readiness. Warren has been identified as the best political athlete on the stage. Love you, brother, but I'm saying in terms of, what she can do skill for skill, toe to toe, it has not resonated.
The quote is, I don't think there's a chance of the senator beating President Trump. If he goes and is the candidate, we'll have Donald Trump for another 4 years, and we can't stand that.
Andrew, is that true?
Well, that's his argument, and there are a lot of Democrats.
You agree with the argument?
There are a lot of Democrats who are concerned that if you have Bernie at the top of the ticket, it's going to mean a very, very tough night in a lot of swing states.
Do you think it's a fair concern, or do you think it's more about what they're used to versus watching a movement in their midst?
I think it's a fair concern based upon the polling data that shows that Bernie will underperform in various swing states the Democrats highly, highly value. I want to tell a Mike Bloomberg story because we were talking about how he hasn't had all these days in the town halls and the living rooms and whatnot. Back when he was considering running, more than 12 months ago, he actually took trial trips to New Hampshire and Iowa to see if he could relate to the people. And he concluded that it was not his thing. And then he said, hey, I'm not running. And it was only, more recently that he changed his mind on that. So he's a very smart, data-driven guy. He went and got the data. And the data was not very promising at that point. And I think, unfortunately, that manifested itself tonight on the debate stage.
Bernie versus Bloomberg. I think whatever happens tonight, what you're seeing is that there's a judgment on this party. And, frankly, one of the people I had the most hope in is you, because you had a different set of ideas. But the people should be looking in the mirror in this party to figure out what is going on here, because really we should have other choices than just these two outsiders.
We're back here with the power players. We shouldn't lose all sensitivity. Andrew, this is you watching it in a totally different way now that you joined the CNN team. What is it like for you watching it up there on stage and the feeling of what if I had been there versus being here? What's that like?
Well, certainly miss being on the debate stage on many levels. But we're talking about Mike Bloomberg's experience and how I actually anticipated he was going to have a tough night, in part because of the timing of his qualification, and then looking at his campaign schedule, where if you're campaigning, and then someone says, hey, we've set aside this time to prepare for the debate, it's actually very hard to get into debate mode. Like it's almost like another mindset. And to me, the big mistake they made, and this is going to sound, possibly controversial, but I thought they should have advised him to skip this debate. I thought they should have just said, look, I'm not on the Nevada ballot. This is going to confuse voters. We'll see you in the next one. And then some people would have given him a hard time about it, but then he would have had a genuine runway to actually try and get, frankly, prepared to have a better night. And to me, that was the missed opportunities. They should have just said, look, I'm going to skip Nevada.
You know who agrees with you? The campaign.
Yeah,
the campaign. He just put out a statement saying about Bloomberg, he was just warming up tonight. We fully expect Mike will continue to build on tonight's performance when he appears on the stage in South Carolina next Tuesday.
Oh, that's devastating.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was the
usually
last
your
paragraph.
inbox is full of every candidate
How
saying
great
that
he
they
was.
Well,
had
it
won
does
the
start
debate.
by saying you know you're a winner
of
when
their
you're drawing
statement.
attacks from all the candidates.
Right.
But that's the most important
That's
part
very
of the
modest
statement.
spin.
That is D-spin, I think. For the first
8 debates,
They didn't.
it was kid gloves. I mean, they didn't go
Mickey
really
Mouse
well. There were a
Club.
couple of shots, but not really much.
There goes the
It was
Van's
mostly
idea,
about
doesn't
Trump, right?
Yeah,
So-
I agree with Terry that a lot of them were coached that, look, let it all hang out tonight. This
Yeah.
could be
Oh,
our
yeah.
last debate. This is existential. We're all good. You
Well,
have to, and it actually showed in some of their performance. Like you could tell Elizabeth was very fired up.
Elizabeth was like,
Excellent.
tonight I settle all family business.
What is the best way to measure what the impact of a night is? And not surprisingly, Andrew Yang said, I'll tell you what's going to matter. And interestingly, Bloomberg's asset is money. You're saying that's what matters after the debate. What has to happen for someone to know that it worked for them?
Well, I thought Elizabeth Warren had a tremendous night. They announced they raised $425,000 in the first hour of the debate. But that means that she's going to raise probably $1, $2, $3, $4 million in the days after the debate. And she needs to raise 20, 30, 40 million if she's going to contend in the Super Tuesday states that have very expensive media markets. That's why Bloomberg has so much power in this race, is that he can put ads up in all these states that every other candidate is not going to be able to afford.
people don't have any money. You're shaking your head. You know this
Yeah,
story.
I do.
And who has the money to compete other than Bernie Sanders right now and Michael Bloomberg?
That's the great question is, could Elizabeth or Joe or Amy or Pete have some kind of breakout night that led
Right.
to tens of millions of dollars in donations, not just from people watching at home, but also donors who are on the sidelines right now, frankly, getting phone calls from Mike Bloomberg saying, hey, sit this one out. I got this. And if you're a donor, not donating is actually a pretty appealing pitch.
Keep your money.
I'll do it.
Wait, I'm sorry. Wait, can you
Hiring
just say
a lot
that
of
again? Mike
people-
Bloomberg is calling donors saying, "Don't give to my opponents."
Mike Bloomberg is calling donors saying, hey, just sit this one out. I've got this. I'll bankroll the whole thing. Just don't donate to anybody.
You hear this? You know this.
I heard this from a major donor say that
Like your donor.
yes, like a donor said that,
Yeah.
and it's a person who donates to a number of
Yeah.
candidates ordinarily said that these are the phone calls that Mike.
And you
One of the
think
game,
Elizabeth-
it's one of the rule changes in the game now is that when you say something, we don't just say, "Are you sure?" We say, "Where'd you hear it?" Because on the analysis side, we got to make sure we're putting something out that we can verify. So Andrew is, of course, correct that you have to manifest your success in money. Bernie Sanders' party about billionaires should go, and obviously Mike Bloomberg giving a different perspective. Andrew, how did it play for you?
To me, it's a struggle for the soul of the Democratic Party, and it mirrors what happened to the Republican Party in the last cycle, where you had Donald Trump, the outsider, who's running roughshod over all these traditional candidates who were putting up Republican talking points, and it turned out that their ideas just weren't that powerful anymore. And this time you have Bernie, the outsider, the front runner now, poised to run the table. And the establishment's been looking around for a white knight, and Bloomberg has shown up with all of his money, all of his wealth, all of his TV ads. And to me, this was a great night for Bernie because Bernie emerges as the front runner. He's really hard to touch, Bernie. I mean, like I've been on the debate stage with him, 7 times, and he's just like a stoic messenger. Like it doesn't matter what you say to him, he'll just pivot right back to one of his Bernie-esque talking points. And then the minute passes.
Elizabeth Warren, that was a taste of what she did basically to everybody on that stage, once again proving that she is arguably the best political athlete that the party may have. But the question becomes, is what you just saw enough to make her money in a position where she can be competitive? Let's take it to the bigger minds. Now, Andrew, you've been giving us the practicality of this. A little bit of update in what we understand. The Bernie Sanders campaign posted the best fundraising night of any debate yet. 2.7 million, they say, from 150,000 donations. It's according to spokesperson Casca. The Elizabeth Warren campaign had its best fundraising day ever, according to a tweet from Caitlin Mitchell, Warren's chief mobilization officer. More than $1 million during the debate.
Yeah, those are really impressive sums. The question is whether she's going to get another million in the hours after the debate, and then another million, and then another million, and then another million. because the advertising buys she would need to make in some of the big markets on Super Tuesday are really expensive, like California, Texas. I was just sharing an anecdote about how the Bloomberg campaign has just been hoovering up staff from every campaign, including mine, paying way above market rate. They're almost like a big company that's doing roll-ups or acquisitions, but the acquisitions are actually political staff. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if many of the candidates on the stage tonight were losing staff to Bloomberg because he's offering 150 to 200% of what the market rate is essentially at every level.
So it's not just the advertising. I think people think about him. Oh, they're talking about he's buying up all the ads. He's buying up all the talent in the Democratic Party. I've heard that that's actually causing some problems. People trying to run for state senate and stuff like that. They can't
really hurting
actually
down ballot candidates.
Can't even.
What I've heard.
But they have to want to work for him, right? Or is the money enough where they're just going to work for him just so that they get through the cycle?
If you're a political operative, I mean, you work for a lot of candidates. Yeah, really.
Wow.
Bloomberg, I think, got really wrong. He was really tone deaf on some of these questions around class, around income. Really he said, when he said, I worked really hard, and that's why I have all this money. You know what, buddy? There's a lot of people
who work really
who are
hard.
working really hard,
less than $60 billion.
who don't have all that money. When he had the little thing around, I can't possibly figure out a way to, count all my money.
At this stage, we've only had 2 contests.
Right.
They are trying to dig down to their supporters.
What's getting late early, Terry? It's getting late early.
It is late early, but hold on. It's late early for us also. So let's get in one more break here. And when we come back, we're going to have
stayed in.
Maybe Yang's going to get back in the race. Stay tuned for the answer to that question right after this.
That Cuomo money.
Yeah, you have to shoot ads. You have to make the media buy. You need some lead time. To me.
All right, we're going to go ahead and try and take this live. Thank you everyone for joining this stream. Be sure and let me know if there's any problems with the audio quality or anything at all, because Lord knows I have enough every single time that I turn my computer off and on again. It decides to reset everything. And right on time, the technical issues start. There we go.
Yeah. Okay, so your background, I gotta say, your background of sad, morose Keanu Reeves is life. It's really, really good.
Oh, is that Keanu Reeves? I was like, where are you?
It's sad Keanu.
Sad Keanu. Yeah, this is my general mood, and I wanted to be able to express that in some way. So he's going to join us along for the debate discussion.
That's great. Yep. So
we thought
there
you
go.
might have forgotten about what Pacific Standard Time was again, Seth.
He's good. He's good. He's good.
Wait, did I?
No, no, you're good. You're good. You're good.
Now I'm just being mean.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
I'm usually the late one, so I was like, uh-oh.
No, you're good.
We're all here. Let's do it.
All right, well, let's rock and roll. I'm just gonna restart and do our little intro for the moving forward part of this.
And I'm going to go ahead and record just in case any.
Yeah. Welcome to the Moving Forward podcast. This is your host Corey Cottrell, and of course we got my very, very good buddy Rio Vernier.
Hey guys.
That's about 600 milliseconds there. I like that one. And we got Seth from the Dividend Report. We're actually live on the Dividend Report right now. If you want to catch us doing these post-debate things, you want to go over to the Dividend Report on YouTube and make sure that you're subscribed. You can catch us doing that live. Or obviously, if you're following any of us on Twitter, we do tend to share it out on there as well. So yeah, we're going to talk about some debates. Really, it's more or less just chatting about whether or not the mugging will have an effect or not.
Mugging, that's one way of putting it. I would say public execution.
Well, I think brutal on TV murder is another way you could put it.
Yeah, whatever happened to what stays in Vegas or what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Obviously, not this Bloomberg thing. I could not
No.
believe what happened.
No, they accidentally put that on TV for everyone to see. Yeah, and so like the Rio and I were talking about it a little bit last night. And Rio, I don't know how much you want to get into that, because he proved literally everything I've said about how toxic money in politics is. He proved it in less than 10 minutes in
Bring it
messaging
up.
back and
Bring
forth.
it up.
Well, he's basically like, Rio was very sad that the Democrats were mean to the billionaire because the billionaire is going to spend $2 billion on the election. Which
I think it's not a good strategy. Yeah.
Which on face value, right? I get. But that proves everything that I've ever said about money in politics being ridiculous, because now, oh my God, we have to show deference to the guy with the money. Otherwise, the guy might take the money away, right? There's a really good argument for taking all of his money away.
And now, didn't this happen again in 2016?
Oh
Didn't Hillary Clinton like publicly like fund the DNC when they were like short on cash in 2016?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
No. But I mean, like the one thing that a lot of actually all candidates at that level do is share campaign funds with down ticket ballots and different things like that. So if anything like that happened, it's perfectly in line with how that's supposed to happen. So I mean that's not really a thing. So I mean that's the thing. So like Rio thinks that we should all be nice to the billionaires, otherwise they might take their money and go home. I think you either survive in a trial by fire, or you should go home with your tail tucked between your legs because you're basic.
So
okay. Can Rio say what Rio thinks?
Go ahead.
Rio absolutely can. That's a much better idea than me paraphrasing.
Yeah, I was about to comment on your analysis of Rio, and I think you should probably talk before I do.
Yeah. Rio should definitely talk first.
Straw manning me more like it's okay.
I mean that might be fair.
What I found frustrating is that they attacked him. They made some legitimate criticisms, like the stop and frisk thing is actually part of his record. Yeah. That's fair game, but a lot of the language they use, the rhetoric they use, attacking him simply for being rich, and just kind of the viciousness that the attacks came with was unprecedented in this primary. Nobody else got that treatment, and Bloomberg isn't even the front runner. Bernie Sanders is the front runner, and the Democrats are letting Bernie Sanders run away with the nomination because they didn't go after the front runner.
Okay. Yeah, no, I like that you brought this, because Greg actually kind of said the same thing, and you're both wrong. And here's why. No, I mean, like really wrong, just on a math basis. Because I get, sort of pragmatically or ideologically why that would be the case. And we talked about this a little bit last night. The reason why Elizabeth Warren is going after the billionaire in the race is because he's actually the lowest hanging fruit. It is anathema to normal Democratic voters to nobody's excited about voting for a billionaire, right? The only argument is, and because the biggest thing with the Democratic Party is we should probably get rid of Trump because it's a traitorous piece of shit who's putting kids in cages. Oh, you want to put $2 billion on this race? Now you're allowed to basically, we can be entertained by that. The thing is, though, the moderate wing of the Democratic Party is maybe 65%, 70% of the voting bloc, right? But Bernie has 25% of his base locked in. Those people will never move. Attacking Bernie Sanders is literally pointless now. It just is. You're not going to get any of those people to come over at all. You have to show that you can be the last person standing out of 5 or even 6 people that are basically in the everybody else category, right? Like that 70% of votes is up for grabs. If you don't get that, this is all over. Right? If you have 7 people in the moderate wing attacking Bernie Sanders, you're going to have 7 people in the moderate wing that are attacking Bernie Sanders on Super Tuesday, and he will absolutely win that day. Right? You like going after everybody else, which is what Elizabeth Warren did, was exactly the right thing to do.
Oh, you think she went after everybody, not just Bloomberg? I guess that's true.
She really did, right? Like when they were talking about healthcare, she murdered everyone else, right? Yeah. Like one after the other, right?
But, okay. So you're in your analysis here. Elizabeth Warren is a moderate.
What now? Yeah, 100%. I mean, honestly,
let Seth say something.
Yeah,
so he keeps opening his mouth.
Now, I do want to talk about Elizabeth Warren because I wanted to ask that specific question. But before we go there, I just want to back up for a quick second and take a look at a tweet that Trump made. And I know this is just a terrible thing to do in general, but Here, let's go for it.
But we're going to do it anyway.
February 18th at 3:51 p.m. Donald J. Trump. What Mini Mike is doing is nothing less than a large-scale illegal campaign contribution. He is spreading money all over the place, only to have recipients of his cash payments, many former opponents, happily joining or supporting his campaign. Isn't that called a payoff? What reality do we live in where not only are all of the people on stage going after Bloomberg, but also the current opponent to the Democrats is also going after Bloomberg. So
he's terrified of Bloomberg, and he should be.
Do you think so?
Yes, of course I do. And here's why: Bloomberg could outspend him 10-1 by himself.
Bloomberg is going to spend more money on this one election than Donald Trump would have if he sold every single one of his properties tomorrow.
And, don't sleep on this. We were talking about this on coffee this morning. So, Bloomberg is among my least favorites, if not right at the bottom of who I would vote for in this primary. I would happily volunteer for him in the general for tons of reasons that we can get into. But the main distinction is this: before he started running for president, he gave $5 million to Stacey Abrams for her campaign to actually, organize around making sure that Republicans can't disenfranchise voters all over the place, right? She's raising money to go into the states that are the most like Georgia, that are the most set up to potentially be rolled over like they did in Georgia, taking 400,000 people off the rolls just for fucking fun, which is the only reason why she lost, right? She did not concede that race because it was stolen, period. Right. So she's organizing in the way that only she can, frankly. And seeing that, the billionaire decided before he was getting into this race at all to help the Democratic Party in a massive way. Because that $5 million will probably be worth $50 or $500 million anywhere else in the race. It really could be that much of a difference, right? Now, do I like that a billionaire is required for that? No, I don't like any of this. All this sucks. We should have democracy dollars where the power of a billionaire would be dramatically reduced. Right? You'd have to be a trillionaire, quite frankly, to affect things in a world with $25 billion worth of democracy bucks going into every election. But he's doing things that are genuinely good. As another example, he's actually talking about putting $2 billion towards the race. He's actually spent $400 million already, which is fucking insane, but whatever. Just to get your fucking balls stomped on national TV. That's, pretty funny. But he's hiring people at $6,000 a month, even ex-staffers for campaigns that they're taking out. He's hiring up everybody that he can, which, again, if you're a billionaire, that's what you would want to do. But he's saying, even if I lose, these people have jobs up to November, right? And that's why I think he's actually serious about following through on his promises on that. Because my buddy Greg, who actually announced it on this morning, he's still waiting for the call back. But they basically explained to him as a potential staffer for Bloomberg in Florida that he's paid up to November, no matter whether or not he stays in the race or not. It's a big deal, right? And again, still on the bottom of my list because the last thing I want is an arrogant billionaire, and he is, right? I'm sorry if that's vicious language. I wouldn't want to hurt the billionaire's feelings, right? But it's not like he's not really trying to thread the needle to do work. And ultimately, I firmly believe his main operating principle is to get rid of Donald Trump. Everything after that is pure ego. But that first one, you get points for that for me.
Corey, you saying that is less of a problem. Here's a question that I have. Is the left trying to lose? Because this guy is going to give them $2 billion to help get Donald Trump out. And they just treated him in an uncivil way. That was,
what do you mean by uncivil? Be specific.
Name one other debate where somebody was attacked as viciously as that. Another candidate
with their own record?
No, not like I said. Stuff about his record, I think, is fair.
So be specific.
What beyond that?
What do you mean?
I think attacking him specifically for being rich.
How did they do that?
Because you just did it. I don't want a billionaire to be president. Well, why the hell not?
Because
that's not an argument.
It absolutely is. They've corralled too much power to themselves for far too long, and they keep buying our elections.
Moving forward is all about policies. Bloomberg's Medicare for All policy is quite similar to Andrew Yang's.
Yep.
I would not be the least bit surprised if he comes out in support of UBI and ends up earning Yang's endorsement as a consequence of that. Bloomberg News ran and not just like an activist, writing for Bloomberg News, a major staff opinion writer for Bloomberg News is saying UBI is a good idea right now. And also writing articles about Medicare for all. I mean, they're basically running articles supporting Bloomberg's positions because he promised that they wouldn't cover the race.
Right.
But they're talking about Medicare for all. They're talking about all kinds of programs to help the poor on Bloomberg News right now. And I mean, I'm not, I don't want to get egg on my face and say he's definitely going to do it, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did. So I think we should go back to making our decisions based on data and policies like we did when we were Yang Gang.
And that's one of the things about this debate is that of all the debates, this one was the most lacking in any kind of policy discussion. It was just ideology versus ideology 100% of the way. I do wonder, because I can see what Rio's saying, but I can't help, how did we see this going? I mean, after 2016, this has been the dialogue we've been having for years. It appears to me that Bloomberg spent $250 million just to get publicly humiliated, which, hey, whatever your kink is, whatever, I don't care. But what did he expect going into this debate stage? I knew from the beginning that Bernie's going to be just hammering this home, and Warren has been consistently filling in the gaps where Bernie has not. And she overperformed in the ways that she attacked him. Of course, it's a different discussion what Rio's having. At the same time, though, I just can't, if he wanted to really help things, he would do it from the background, I think. He wouldn't put his face on there.
Well, I mean, if you're there is a through line between, I honestly think it's a mental illness between wanting to accrue that much wealth unto yourself and ego, right? And so, I mean, ego is going to be a thing, and so I don't know. It's not, but I mean, they all have it, right? It's not just a billionaire thing. It requires a certain amount of sociopathy, no matter who you are, to run for president.
Yeah.
Because if you were, I think, really emotionally well put together, you'd be like, yeah, let somebody else do that. That's a shitty job, and it is.
And so, we're not going to leave Yang out of this discussion, obviously. And one of the things that he spoke a lot about in his post-debate analysis on CNN, which we can spend some time talking about.
Shout out to the Zach and Matt show. That 15, 18 minute, whatever breakdown where they literally just cut all Andrew Yang stuff into that. With that warmed my heart yesterday. That was really great.
It was great. And so some of his commentary specifically focused on the point of what I am looking at, the experience of running for president taught me was that the person after the debates who makes the most money is the person to look at for how they're going to be performing in the immediate future, which is weird because Bloomberg doesn't follow that metric. He just has the money to spend. But hearing that from Yang really drove home this entire point that's revolving around the entire discussion we've been having so far, that money is the primary contributor to determining who's succeeding and not succeeding. And that is such a messed up thing in my mind. And it's something that I continually forget about and then get surprised when I learn about it again.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about that now is that we're going to see, right? The idea that, Elizabeth Warren, if she gets even 10% of what Bloomberg is spending, and she probably won't even get up to that level, right? None of them will, except maybe Bernie. We're going to see how much it matters, right? Because everyone's talking about the fact that Bloomberg's just been completely and totally eviscerated and his candidacy is over. I'm not at all certain of that, right? The debate was the most viewed by a good margin, I think, which is interesting. It's going to have some amount of an effect. But the guy, understanding how far these ads are going out, if you look at Bloomberg ads, they're all really good, right? He's speaking to the pure ethos of the sort of democratic value set. In the people that are making his ads are making crap tons of money and they deserve it. His ads are good, right? Those are going to be going out in using the mirror effect as well, right? Repetitive in a way that could make up for absolutely as much as Warren did damage to him in that debate, right? Maybe more.
Yeah, and Bloomberg is going to leak something is going to leak from his campaign in the next couple of days that'll shift the narrative, and then people won't be talking about the debate at all anymore.
Is this insider information?
He's better than Trump at trolling the media. He will get them to talk about what he wants them to talk about.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's really possible that they're going to talk about Warren's eviscerating him live on TV for a week instead of that. But
Okay,
we'll see.
So Warren,
I don't know.
We were just about to have a discussion of is Warren a moderate or not. Like I said,
She's always has been.
Well, she fills in the gaps of Bernie's populism. She like accentuates it in ways that she sounds like a populist. She sounds like a progressive populist, but I continue to hear her being put into the camp of moderates. So what's the discrepancy there?
I mean, I think she always was a moderate, to be honest. She went kind of whole bore on the progressive thing because she's actually been a progressive for a long time as well. Because I don't necessarily see them being entirely different. Going for Medicare for all as single payer. Again, I don't find that as a completely and totally crazy idea because I think it's a really good idea, but politically it's a lot harder, right? And then just looking at she was making the calculation that there would be enough energy and enough credibility on the progressive wing that she could build a coalition out of that, right? And getting further into the race, you realize that Bernie's got 25% of the Democrats just locked down. They're locked down. And there just isn't any point anymore.
She and Bernie Sanders were going kind of neck and neck until that whole thing happened where somebody leaked from her campaign that she mentioned that, privately, that Bernie Sanders said that a woman couldn't win. I think that the Bernie bros left Warren over that. I think that Warren lost a lot of people and Sanders picked up a lot of people because a lot of them are sexist. I think that's why Sanders is in the lead right now, if I'm being honest. But you know what? It wasn't just Elizabeth Warren attacking Bloomberg. Everybody was. But the person I think did the best job of it was actually Pete. Because he did what I would have advised somebody to do in that situation, which is to contrast himself with both Bloomberg and Sanders. Because all that money Bloomberg is spending right now is designed to contrast him with Trump and to contrast him with Sanders. That's what it's about. He's saying, you want to get Trump out, you don't want to elect a socialist, I'm your guy. And what Pete did is he came in and said, if you don't want, a Rockefeller Republican and you don't want a socialist, if you want like a normal Democrat, I'm your guy. And I think that was a smarter play because he could, I think you might be right, Corey, that he's not going to take voters from Sanders that way. But moderates who are looking for someone to coalesce behind, he's an obvious choice because he's performed well in the first couple of states. And so for him to contrast himself from both Bloomberg and Sanders as that made more sense to me than just going after Bloomberg.
Well,
I don't think Warren is even trying to win this election.
Oh, I disagree there. But I agree with you on Pete because I think there are people that the more millennial bent or whatever. Like I think he actually could peel off some of the younger vote just because they want somebody with who's freaking not 100 years old. So I think that makes a lot more sense with Pete. Warren can't really do that.
I mean, I don't see Warren as a moderate. I see her as would be naturally the most left-wing candidate in the race if Bernie Sanders weren't running. That's the way I see her. And I think that she has decided that Sanders has locked up her vote.
Well, if she is a moderate, then she is going to be Sanders' pick for VP should Sanders win the nomination, right?
Maybe. But I mean, he could turn around and pick Nina Turner or pick Kamala Harris, right? Like there's, Bernie Sanders, sadly, and I hope that he proves me wrong about this if given the opportunity, doesn't seem like the coalition building type, which is, that's the easiest way to lose this election if you ask me. Right. I mean, that if you're gonna get 25% of the Democratic Party and then vilify the Democratic Party if they think that a coalition ticket, which is what a brokered convention creates, right? That's what it's all about. I mean, when they all said that they would love to go to the convention and build it through that way, realize that's ranked choice voting for the Democratic primary, right? But everybody in the Bernie Sanders camp is like, oh, they're gonna steal it from Bernie, blah blah blah. Shut the fuck up, right? Like the entire Democratic Party is not your little tiny coalition, right? And forcing everybody else in the Democratic Party to go along with that is garbage. It's just not how any of this is supposed to work. Even though it's complicated and nuanced and a pain in the ass, right?
You're not supposed to get the nomination with 30% of the vote or 25% of the vote.
Right. Because, I mean, you have to build a unity ticket Otherwise, people will stay home. People will get disgruntled and people will get pissed off.
Except the vote blue no matter who crowd is everyone
That's me,
except.
by the way.
It was okay, yeah. It was everyone except for Bernie Sanders and Yang supporters. So you were in not a minority of those voters. I mean, it would be incredulous to me. I mean, I understand that point, but 30% of the vote. How does it make sense to then take someone who got 25% of the vote and say, well, no, this is.
So here's the thing:
one.
if they got 25% of the vote, but let's just game it out here, right? So let's say Warren has 20 and Bernie Sanders has 25 or 30, right? Okay. You go to a brokered convention, and all of Steyer's delegates go to Warren because she's building that coalition, and all of Castro's or whatever, all of Yang's, for example, who knows, right? All of Biden's, all of Bloomberg's delegates, because she's building coalition, go to Elizabeth Warren. That's effectively delegate level ranked choice voting.
And the delegates themselves,
everyone's second choice. So now you have a coalition of 60, 65, 70% of candidates, delegates that as a group want to push together as a whole. And that is stronger than just Bernie Sanders.
The delegates themselves were elected by the supporters of the individual candidates.
Right.
So they really are, in some respect, actually speaking for those people.
So the criticism at that point is the super delegates, and they are still in play should a brokered convention happen. I think it was specifically super delegates and the fact that they're like party insiders and all of the nonsense.
100%. And I mean, now it should be noted that Bernie Sanders' team worked with the DNC to change all the rules. And so there is now, I think, 1/6 of the number of super delegates as there was before. So that is, I think, is a really, really positive thing. I'm not a huge fan of the super delegate idea anyway, but it's a little bit more of a serious thing than a rounding error, but not by much, right?
Could I defend the super delegates for a second?
Oh gosh, I don't know about that.
If you didn't, Mr. Elite, hold on. You need your like crystal mug, and definitely have to have your pinky out the entire time just to complete the effect.
Hold on, where's my wine cave?
Well, you know how we keep talking about how frustrating it is that as part of this populist fever that's come over this country, people are not just losing faith in our democratic institutions. They're not just losing faith in our financial institutions. They're not just losing faith in government itself and the rule of law itself. They're also losing faith in expertise. They're losing faith in science. And, there is something to be said about people who are experts who actually know what they're doing, making decisions and ruling the world, as opposed to average Joe. I know that it's not PC or popular to say, but like average Joe ain't as smart as an expert when it comes to making a decision about something the expert is an expert on. And what superdelegates are experts on choosing a candidate who can actually win in reality, not just in the fantasy land between average Joe's ears.
The tyranny of the majority, you're essentially saying.
Right, which is actually the reason why we have a republic, and it's the reason why we have what's called a liberal democracy with constitutional protections. So, if Bernie Sanders' guys, some of them do, want to vote to take away everybody's right to own private property tomorrow, I'm not saying that's on Sanders' policy platform, but some of the Bernie bros want to do that, then the Supreme Court could come in and say, that's actually unconstitutional, and they wouldn't be able to do it. Right. So there are lots of protections to the tyranny of the majority that our founding fathers very wisely built into the system, in my opinion. Now, of course, superdelegates and primaries, that's nothing to do with anything the founders did, because actually for most of U.S. history, the parties just chose their candidate. They just chose their candidate from lower level people who had proven themselves in government and worked their way up. And they didn't even do primaries until just, a few decades ago.
I think your point is valid, but I also think you're wrong in the terms of believing that there is inherently some kind of metric of expertise in the people who are elected in these positions. I don't know. I forget exactly what discussion it was. I believe it was like Michelle Obama who was saying something about once I got into the White House and started speaking with all of these, high society people, they're not that smart. I mean, a lot of them are not that smart. And it's nepotism, it's ingrained just status and everything that can equally be just as entrenched And the problem is it feels like we're in a rock and hard place. Like on one side, there's the tyranny of the majority. On the other side, there's just an incompetent, ingrained status quo that's not getting anything done and causing
is it
problems.
really that incompetent? I mean, I feel like
Yes.
our government is still doing a heck of a lot better than, a lot of other places.
Well, yeah, Somalia. We're doing better than Somalia. The bar's not very good, right? If you
We're
actually
doing
look at-
better than every other country that's tried socialism, for example, right?
well, unless you define socialism the way that it's commonly referred to, and then we're actually doing way worse.
The way that Sanders lies about, yeah.
Well, lies about, talks about, potato.
It feels
Well,
like
I know, but like I was just talking to somebody on Twitter the other day who was defending Sanders, and it's kind of funny to watch Yang Gang break down, and I don't want that. But they are sort of getting divided a little bit. We still all like Yang. That's what's so funny about it. He really is our gumbo. We're made up of all these different ingredients, and we don't lose our individuality. We don't lose our individual values, and that's why I'm still I'm still a conservative. Sorry, shock and awe. I didn't stop being.
Yeah, everyone's super surprised
just because Yang dropped out of the race, right?
Right.
But yeah, like I was talking to this guy and he was defending Sanders. He said, well, I really respect that he's consistent. And I said, well, okay, one way of looking at that is to say that he's closed-minded and hasn't changed his mind about anything in a really long time. It's like it got baked in. This is the worldview that I have left over from the Cold War, and I'm never going to look at an alternative. And if he had been more open-minded, he might have embraced a UBI instead of a federal jobs guarantee. And also
that's a solid criticism.
Being consistently dishonest about your worldview and telling people that democratic socialism is the same as social democracy when all they have to do is look it up in literally any textbook to see that that's a lie, that is consistent, I guess. Calling Norway socialist when, Norwegians themselves will tell you that they're a capitalist society.
Okay, let's get into this now. Do you know why he does that? Like, I know we've talked about this before, but you know why he does that? Every Republican ever has been calling everyone from me to everyone else in the Democratic Party a fucking socialist for 50 years. That's why he does it.
But it's the wrong way.
Now. They call Norway socialist. They call Canada socialist. They call Finland socialist. We did not fucking start this shit. It was your team.
Well,
right?
Okay.
That would be now he's not lying now. You
Okay,
guys changed what the word socialist means, and now he's using it the way that you guys fucking did.
Okay. Well, you realize that not all Republicans agree with me. I
am aware.
And I'm not even a
saying.
Republican anymore now that it's been taken
and
over.
Thank you for that.
It's been taken over by the Trumpkins. I have no interest in that party.
Yeah.
But like,
sorry, I got a little riled up.
Your argument would have a point if he didn't have a history before he even entered politics of actually being a socialist organizer, standing up for actual socialist ideas, defending actual socialist countries, including places that were doing really awful, undemocratic things. Part of the reason he doesn't want people talking about his record from way back in the day is because it proves that what you just said isn't true. I understand people throwing their hands up in the air and saying, "Oh, they're going to call us socialists anyway," and that's a perfectly legitimate point to make. But none of the others are socialists. That's the difference. If we nominate Sanders, Trump will be telling the truth about him. It might be the first time that he ever told the truth, and it would be by accident. But
well, and this is where I think it needs to come out. I think people need to be really specific. Like, when did he say that a socialist was good? Because like when I looked for that, I found like he'd actually praised Cuba for a couple things they were doing, especially around agriculture, and he was right.
He even defended the Soviet Union.
Well, I mean, find me that specific thing.
Okay,
there's a video of him,
right? I mean,
I'll write a blog about it. Obviously, I don't have the research in front. I'll write a blog.
Right, because I think that again, trial by fire for Bloomberg, all for it. Trial by fire for Bernie Sanders. Like now that he's the front runner, I think people really need to be getting into that because it's such a valid argument to say. Right. Again, like I get really uppity around the whole socialism thing and calling it a lie and calling it whatever, because honestly, like it's been such a disingenuous argument from the right for so long that I personally don't care anymore until I start talking to burners that are like, no, you shouldn't be allowed to own property. I'm like, well, you're fucking on drugs. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. Corey, you're 100%. You're absolutely right about the Republican Party. And people can only cry socialist and call Barack Obama a socialist so many times before people stop taking it seriously.
Just don't care anymore.
Well, and so your attitude there is understandable, and it is partially the fault of the Republican leadership for doing that. They shouldn't have cried wolf like that. It was actually a betrayal of right-wing values to do that, because it means that the American people won't be prepared when a real socialist comes along.
Right. That's the thing. You start to desensitize the term itself and the actual problems that you have with it by attacking it in that manner. I mean, Trump just tweeted a couple. I really need to get off of Twitter because I'm looking at Trump's tweets and that's just not good.
I blocked Trump like
man.
weeks ago.
I used to cover his tweets on #coffee all the time, and now I barely ever do because it was ruining my faith in humanity.
Yeah, exactly. Let me see here. It's if our formerly targeted farmers need additional aid until such time as the trade deals with China, Mexico, Canada, and others fully kick in, that aid will be provided by the federal government paid out of the massive tariff money coming into the USA.
There's not tariff money coming in. It's all being paid by American corporations. Number two, you know what that is, Rio?
Yeah.
Fucking socialism.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it totally is.
Right?
Yeah.
And again, now granted, like Rio has been calling the alt-right and Donald Trump fucking leftist asshole for a long time. So, I mean,
I call them racist socialists. I say that the only difference between them and Bernie bros is that they're racist. Like literally the only difference. I can't tell them apart half the time when they're talking to me.
And it's so crazy.
That's on Twitter. I mean, so, and I want to say, like, Pod Save America had a big thing on, Bernie's, in the lead right now, and that's a real thing or whatever. And they talk about, like, every time they've ever talked to, and they organize all throughout the country with activists and people working on the ground or whatever, right? Anytime that they've talked to any of the Revolution people or any people that are actually working as activists on the ground, they say exactly what I say. Bernie Sanders supporters are awesome if you are like talking to them as human beings. The second you get on Twitter and they like, even in the mentions, what's his face from Pod Save was talking about this, like they spent most of their episode praising Bernie Sanders and the activists around his campaign that are actually doing the work on the ground. And the Bernie bro freaking people went on Twitter anyway and just started nuking their mentions. Right. And so it really, really is localized to the internet, but that doesn't mean that it isn't a problem. It is a legitimate problem, especially when, again, it's limited to the internet until they start doxing union reps for having the audacity not to endorse it.
I know somebody because his family used to live in La Jolla here where I'm at now. And he's a huge Bernie Sanders advocate. And like, I know him in real life. And I have to say, like, as a never Trump Republican, defending Hillary Clinton and saying, look, you guys, we can't let Trump win. Yeah, I would vote for Hillary Clinton. I've had people who I know in real life to my face who were nice to me until I started doing that, viciously telling me that, like, I'm going to have to be re-educated. I'm going to have to be sent to the gulags. Like, it's just not true that it's only on Twitter. And we have to remember that the anonymity of Twitter might make people a little bit less filtered. Yeah. But unless it's an actual robot or a Russian troll, and some of them are, unless that's the case, you are still dealing with an actual Bernie supporter a lot of the time. And they live in reality. And not everybody has the courage to tell you that to your face. But what I've noticed is that if you really press people and you say like, maybe it happens to conservatives more often because I'm further removed from their worldview. And so they're more likely to attack me. Right. But, if I say, like, for example, I don't think that we should take away people's ability to set rents at the prices that the market demands. They will. That's when it comes out, man. That's when the fangs come out because they're like, oh, this guy is the enemy. We eat the rich. That's where it comes out.
Well, I have to give you that because that's the thing. Like, it's not like I spend a whole lot of time disagreeing with Bernie Sanders supporters on policy, right? So no, I can see that. And again, I had it out with a bunch of Bernie supporters yesterday about the fact that, like, why don't you just admit that it's a problem and then deal with it? Because they refuse. They're just in perfect denial. Yeah. Which, I mean, again, all of that stuff happens because of leadership. That stuff is absolutely coming from the top, and it's coming from inaction from the top, quite frankly. Because I think, if Bernie Sanders admitted that this was real and wanted to change the culture in his organization, between him and Nina Turner, they could do it. Right? They have the leadership chops to do that if they wanted to make it a priority, and they're not doing it. And that is something for which they need to be criticized.
As part of CNN, as part of Yang's CNN analysis, he was asked point blank by one of the moderators or one of the other panelists, do you think that concerns about Bernie Sanders' electability because he calls himself a socialist are legitimate or not? And Yang said, I've looked at the data, I've done the math, and it looks like they are valid concerns.
I mean, that's it. they're going to call us a socialist no matter what. But why give them ammunition?
Yeah, unless you are. Yeah.
Well, and
No,
I do want to say, sorry, we got to get
you-
Seth in here because like we're totally
please do.
hijacking the
Yeah.
show like a fucking
Yeah.
crazy person. But the thing I've always said, my favorite thing about Bernie Sanders is that he's yanking the conversation back to the center, frankly, by being on the left, right? Like when you look at the everybody on stage has a better healthcare idea than the ACA right now. You know, some form of combination of a public option and different things, whatever, right? I was fighting like hell for a public option in 2008, right? Even though I am from Canada and a single payer, I know for a fact would work better if you could magically wave your magic wand and make that the case in America, but you can't, right? That's not a thing. But having Bernie Sanders in the race is giving cover for everyone else to have reasonable ideas, which is what I always wanted Obama to do, and he never would. He would go immediately to the consensus position, and then Republicans would take a shit on it, and then half the Democrats would take a shit on it, and now we have the ACA.
You're right about that, Corey, and I agree with you. I want to get Seth in, but I just want to say really quickly about that. The reasons why you can't get single payer in the United States really start with the American people. Sanders has done a very good job persuading people to support Medicare for all, and most of the candidates do support Medicare for all. But he has not yet persuaded the American people to get behind single payer, and the polls show it. There's something like 13% of Americans support Bernie Sanders' form of Medicare for all.
That's
and
just
like
a fact.
58% of Americans and close to 100% of Democrats support, Andrew Yang's or Bloomberg's or name anybody else's version of Medicare for all, apart from Warren, I guess. Although Warren's plan is still better than Sanders's, in my opinion. We can talk about that if you want. But here's something to keep in mind. We almost had a UBI under the Nixon administration, as everybody who's read Andrew Yang's book knows, right? And who did Yang say killed the UBI? Was it Nixon and the Republicans? No, it was the Democrats. And why did the Democrats kill it? Because they were holding out for more. They made the perfect the enemy of the good, and they killed the deal. And that is what Sanders is going to do for the public option. That's what he's going to do for any opportunity to get any progress on healthcare, because he is not. I mean, AOC said we should compromise, and Bernie Sanders said, we've already compromised. No, what? No, we haven't.
Yeah, dude.
Like, I'm sorry, but you can't win by alienating the party you're running in. Is he going to be able to build a coalition in Congress? No.
No, he's going to get
Two-thirds of
ignored.
Democrats in Congress absolutely hate him. There's no way he's going to do it. We can't nominate that guy, guys. I'm telling you.
Just to drive this home a little further, the one part of the debate where Bloomberg may have actually like skimmed by and done okay until he immediately said something about communism afterwards was when
that was so bad.
Yeah.
Anyway,
he brought up, what was it? He says, we're not even going to have this discussion because this is the reason why we will lose. When Bernie brought up, hey, I want workers who are feeling like they're just cogs in the machine to get a ownership stake in the companies that they're working in, and he says, listen, we're not going to go into socialism. That's not going to win us this election and everything. It's unrealistic to expect all of a sudden this massive sharing of ownership and corporations to the workers. And then he immediately goes on and says, we tried that. It was called communism. And that was terrible because it had turned into this social, that entire debate discussion. But he had a point. We're not going to pass in the next 4 or 8 years some kind of like reworking of how corporate America works in that degree, because it's too easily weaponized against politically, the lens, the framing. Like if Bernie had just said, people feel like they're cogs in the machine, we need to make them not feel that way. Because I'm not going to feel any less of a cog if I'm suddenly on the board of a corporation. It all fell apart for Bernie like after that point.
You wouldn't even be on the board. Some worker.
It's almost
would
like
be on
you
the
could,
board. You know what would help all those people a lot more? Universal basic.
That's exactly where I was going. Like, what if you were a shareholder in America?
Yeah, 100%. And I don't even feel like I like, why do I deserve a stake? Yeah, like making the decisions of what the corporation is doing. I understand wanting corporations to make better decisions and everything, but if they're breaking the law, if they're polluting our rivers and streams, we can regulate that away. But the people who are making those decisions have a better insight into how to run these corporations.
You'd think that. Let me push back on that a little bit, because in Germany and a few other European countries, the they mandate that per number of employees, you need to have somebody on the board. Where that changes it is like a lot of these companies have literally sold the pensions at those companies out from underneath their employees, basically just to meet a quarterly fucking deadline, right? And if you have people on the board who are actual employees, that happens, not 0 times, but less times, right? There are it also means that you need less unions for people that don't like unions because you actually have a voice at the table, right? Which again, if you're gonna have labor, actually having labor have a voice at the table in those kind of situations is more complicated, can be very annoying, can get in the way of rampant growth maybe, but I think net is good.
Well,
right? It's not a universal bad by any stretch.
Getting in the way of growth is also synonymous with not allowing our indexed our UBI index to GDP to grow. Like so here's the thing, like, do we want to is going after the rich, is going after those evil bastards like Mike Bloomberg, how dare he give $2 billion to our side? If going after the rich is your goal, you are going to make America less prosperous, and smart people will leave the country, and you're going to run out of money for all of the programs that you want to have. Yang's version of bottom up, growing the economy, making the pie bigger so that all of our share, and actually redistributing fairly, not through means testing and a bunch of bureaucratic red tape bullshit, fairly redistributing 10% of the GDP every year as a dividend, as shares in the country, that actually would grow the pie, and everybody would have a right as an American citizen to a portion of that pie. But we would still have a motivation to compete and innovate because there's still another 90% of the pie every year.
Yeah,
it's just something. The thing
so
is,
much better.
I can understand how somebody like you, Corey, would be like, yeah, Sanders is our guy. But once Yang's in the race, smart progressives like you said, boy, this is a lot better, right? And so like, that's what Yang's done.
Bernie Sanders Bernie Sanders wasn't my favorite this time, and like at all.
Well, and also this time around, you have a whole bunch of other people who support what his platform was last time.
In
and
a non-Yang universe,
outwoke himself. He's moving further to the left. It's just, I don't know. I mean, like,
no, but it's true though. Like,
I think it's ego too. I think in his case, he's also an egomaniac because while like he's going to totally ruin the party's chance to do the things he claimed he wanted them to do.
Yeah, in a universe where Yang shows up and actually talks about UBI, and then I find out that every single other one of his policies are better than anyone else running by a mile or 100. I mean, the progressive movement writ large is over the next 4 to 6 years going to have an awakening, because it's the TYT thing has been gross, like just malpractice of the highest order. Buying into the cult of personality around Bernie Sanders, which is terrible, right? My lodestone for this was AOC from the beginning. I've been following her closely for a long time. She's fucking brilliant. But watching what happened when she decided to back Bernie Sanders and then start like literally just spreading nonsense about UBI was like a stake in the heart. Now, the second that Yang got out of the race, suddenly she starts adopting all of it. Like I believe that she will evolve on this stuff. And I fucking hope I'm right, because if I'm wrong, it's gonna be really, really bad for the progressive movement, and we'll see, right? Okay, but that's the thing. Like you have to decide now, when in a universe with much better ideas out there that have become part of the Overton window, you're gonna pay an electoral cost and a cost in the media if you keep attaching yourself to 1980s solutions when we have 21st century problems.
Yeah, and we just had Scott Santens on the podcast to talk about, basically to help us strategize about how to move the Humanity First movement forward after Yang's departure. And one thing he said that I found very helpful was he said, look, the authoritarian leftists who really believe that you do need, the state to control everything and tell everybody what to do, they are probably actually a minority. The problem is that right now they control the Young Turks, right? And Sanders was able to say, I could just ignore Yang, pretend like he's not a real candidate, don't even bother to attack him. I'm going to let my propaganda arm in TYT tell my lies for me and vilify Yang for me. And that's what they did. So I personally would recommend, as just a matter of rhetorical strategy, and also because I think philosophically it's justified, let's reserve the word progressive for people who have policies that will actually result in progress in reality. I don't believe that Bernie Sanders is progressive. I think he's regressive. And I think Yang was the only progressive in this race.
You know, it's interesting to see how one of the things Yang said was, if I don't make it, everyone's going to sound a lot more like me in the end. And that's true of everyone except for Bernie. If you look at what was said during the debate, Klobuchar at some point said, as my good friend Andrew Yang would say, do the math, which was kind of an interesting thing for her to say, I think. But another thing that Pete did was, like, you could see him almost going for the claw and saying, you know, you have to do the math. I think he said that word for word. Klobuchar also said something during a climate change discussion about giving people dividends based on like a carbon fee. I'm like, whoa, what if you can get behind that idea? Why don't you just go full speed towards it?
I mean, that was an interesting hack, right? Like like pricing in the externality of carbon, I think is a brilliant idea, but automatically pinning it to UBI and having it scale, right? That kind of leans into to Zoltan's position a little bit, which again is fraught but interesting itself. But the whole idea, like, if you would have told me 7 or 8, maybe 9 months ago that we would be talking about different ways to pay for a UBI, I would have laughed at you, right? And here we all are. Like, it's Yang won. I don't care what anyone says. Yang fucking won, and he's going to be a force, forever. And frankly, moving forward, us. Like this weird unity that we get to put together, where like a legit conservative and a bleeding heart liberal and whatever ascended thing Seth is, get together and talk all the time. It's a big deal, right? And that's not going away, and I'm super grateful for that.
Yeah, I think there's a vacuum. If the Young Turks, which I just haven't been keeping up with for a while, but it sounds like they've gone full tilt into a cult of personality.
Yeah, full tit works. it's the thing that's going on. Yeah, I mean, the second Anna Kasparian, who I used to enjoy a great deal, started just straight up lying about UBI, was when I realized that something is completely and totally fucked up here. And quite frankly, everybody on the Majority Report did it too, right? Like, they started making fun of Yang, and like it was fucking weird and totally gross.
And can I just point out that
left-wing media outlet was lying about Yang, and CNN's coverage was more reasonable. Fox News's coverage of Yang was frankly better. I'm sorry, but if Fox News is on any topic is being more logical and factual than you are, you have fucking lost it.
Yeah.
Even, you know what? Bernie Sanders' campaign said that Fox News is even being more afraid of them than MSNBC.
Oh yeah.
Like, what universe is this? Where are we right now?
MSNBC is just they've got. I still like Morning Joe. Joe Scarborough's my guy. Everything else on MSNBC is just a waste of time, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You should. I don't know. I listen to Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes, and they're both fucking geniuses. So the only place where Rachel Maddow screws up is by omission, and sometimes that's on purpose, and I get that criticism. But if she looks at you, she's going to bring data every single time.
Oh yeah. No, that's true. I guess a waste of time was a little bit harsh.
Oh, I mean,
I don't really get my news from television, and I don't recommend people do. But now that Yang's on CNN, I'll be watching it.
Yeah,
me too. He was great. It was great.
I'm largely just anti-MSM, but I don't wear that on my sleeve. And seeing Yang commentate on everything humanized the rest of the panel so much. Like, suddenly I wasn't looking at them as like people who were completely detached from reality. And in fact, they still kind of were, but Yang was gravitating towards bringing them closer. One of them said something at a point of, oh God, I forget exactly what it was, but he said, do you really think that it's this or if it's just money? It was about people working in campaigns and how he says, you can expect to see people going over towards Bloomberg because he's offering 1.5, 2 times the amount as other campaigns in the market. And the guy said, oh, well, you really think that people would leave for money? And it was like, Yang was like, yes, absolutely. That's what happens. That these people are detached.
Greg might get a job with Bloomberg for fucking $6,000 a month until November.
Oh, my
Greg.
God.
Right. And you know what? I told him fucking do it. Of course. Because it's like actual healthcare that he barely gets with Medicare. Right. And he's on disability, right? So he's making like fucking $600 a month. Go make 6,000.
Yeah,
and honestly,
Corey,
what he's going to
yeah.
be doing, what Greg would be doing, would be organizing for a Democratic victory, no matter what. Right?
Yes.
Fucking go do it.
Yeah,
Bloomberg, you know, it's important.
Bloomberg is being very smart. Yeah, absolutely. That's what you do. You try to get the talent from the competition. Like, that's fine. And but you know, it's really amusing to see Bernie Bros so upset. How dare you pay your low-level staffers so well? We're over here fighting for workers' rights, and there you are actually doing it. God damn you, sir.
A similar thing happened when it was like in the news that Bernie's workers were leaving because they weren't getting paid a livable wage.
Yeah.
Like you see that time and time again, and then I think that it's largely disingenuous to bring up, oh, you have 3 houses. Interesting,
that was weak as fuck.
But
a guy who's living in a $25 million mansion, sit the fuck down.
Right, 100%. But at the same time, there is like something to the fact of like you have gotten away with the boons of a capitalistic society. Why is it that you don't think that this could work large? And it's not him; it's his campaign, right? That's
the thing. Like, like if you look at his actual policies, they're totally in line with like social democracy writ large, right? Yes, he's lying about the actual details of it or whatever, but you look at the policies, that's basically what they are.
All of these pundits on the Young Turks or this or that who are saying, no, you have to change the system. They're all getting their own monthly universal basic income. Chapo Trap House makes $130,000 per month from supporters giving them to their Patreon. I was getting upset about thinking that I was a grifter making $550 a month over ad revenue and some supporters on my Patreon. And yet these people are living with their own universal basic income, telling other people that it's not going to work for them. It's so insane.
Yeah,
it's
deeply disingenuous.
They called Scott Santos a grifter. Here's the thing, guys. If you are an independent journalist and people choose to voluntarily send you their money because they want to keep you producing the content that they care about, that is not grifting. That is entrepreneurship. Okay, and socialists don't like entrepreneurs. They don't like passive income. Passive income is a vice. And we should really get to the comments at some point, because if there are any Bernie supporters in there, boy, they've got to hate me a lot. I'm curious to hear what they have to say. But like, I'm even going to defend Bloomberg's use of the C word. not CUNT like a lot of Bernie bros called Hillary Clinton, but
communism. And are still calling Elizabeth Warren, by the way.
Yeah. But communism, right? And the reason I think it's okay for him to say that is because here are the facts, right? Bernie Sanders' actual platform, as Corey absolutely rightly points out, we're the data, the Yang Gang or the data group. I'm not going to argue with facts. Bernie Sanders' actual platform is pretty mainstream social democratic policy. But democratic socialism is not at all the same thing as social democracy. Social democracy is when you have a capitalist society and a very generous social safety net. That's what social democracy is. The US already is a social democracy. Every single first world country, frankly, has been a social democracy for a long time. So being a social democrat isn't that big of a deal. The interesting debate, of course, is about what specific kinds of policies are going to best achieve the goals of the social democratic mindset. And on that, I think we could all agree the federal jobs guarantee is a terrible idea, but it is within, the Overton window of normal social democratic policy. In fact, actually, a lot of Republicans will probably like it because it's basically workfare.
Yeah, especially if you call it workfare, right? Yeah,
that's basically what it is. But here's the thing. Democratic socialism actually means using the democratic process to achieve real socialism as opposed to via violent revolution. That's the actual correct meaning of that term. And here's something to reflect upon. In a capitalist society, you can voluntarily create socialist systems. You could create a worker-owned commune, and a lot of them exist, and you could go work at one now if you want to.
Yep.
If we had a UBI, people could get together and create their own worker-owned communes very easily.
And they would.
Yeah, exactly. So if his goal was to get a libertarian as opposed to an authoritarian, not libertarian like the party, just libertarian as compatible with individual liberty as opposed to state control, if his goal was to get a libertarian form of socialism, he would be advocating for Yang's positions. The only reason to be a democratic socialist in a political sense is if you want involuntary socialism, if you want policies that force people into socialist frameworks who don't want to be there. And once you're in that territory, it's not all that different from communism. And that's part of the reason why in practice, communism is the only one that's ever actually happened.
So what would you say? Because like, I feel like somebody, a right winger in Canada, would try that argument about our single payer healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
Like a very specifically siloed industry
mm-hmm.
where capital motives kill people,
mm-hmm.
right? Which is the main argument that I completely agree with as far as why single payer is good. People are forced into that in Canada. That is a thing, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to get healthcare, you're going to get it this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, you're also forced to get car insurance if you want to drive in the United States, right?
Yeah.
So there are varying levels of this. That's not communism.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not saying,
but like
I'm not
that's sort of
saying
like it's like a slippery slope a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well, okay.
I don't
necessarily want to derail the whole conversation. I was just defending. I don't like if you actually understand a little political science. Bloomberg's statement wasn't totally crazy, but since you asked the question, I'll answer you. No, I do not think simply having single payer is automatically makes you a socialist society, because Canada is still a capitalist society.
Right.
It just
That's
has
kind of my
one
point.
industry that has been totally socialized.
Yeah.
Now, where the slippery slope does come in, though, and I'm hearing Bernie Bolshevik say this to me, like, well, you know what else is a human right is housing. You know what else is a human right is food. You know, and so eventually, I'm not saying, but you like in Canada, that didn't happen, right? So I'm not saying that will happen. I'm just saying that people who are concerned about the government taking more and more control over our lives are not totally crazy. That's all. But like Canada's healthcare system is fine. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm more worried about the federal jobs guarantee because it's going to drive up the deficit. And if the same person who's paying your paycheck is also taxing your paycheck, and you can't fall back on unemployment and use it in order to find a job you actually want. Instead, you're forced into gray overalls, as Yang said, and trapped in wage slavery for the state. That is seriously fucked up. That's not going to happen to me. I am fine. I'm worried about other people being forced into that situation. I think that's frankly wicked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. I agree. And to your point, like the federal jobs guarantee, along with other sort of like nickel and diming, siloed suggestions from other people in the Democratic Party, like trying to fix this little thing here and that little thing here or whatever, those things all make UBI less likely. When honestly, never mind, like housing is a right, food is a right, fine, UBI.
Exactly. Right? There's more than one way to skin a cat, guys.
That's exactly it. And one of them, like a UBI, allows me to go live in a tent instead of some fucking great building somewhere that I don't want to live at.
Mm-hmm. And actually, the point that you brought up about workers being on boards and all of that, what somebody very successful like Bloomberg does, and he's demonstrating it with his campaign right now. He's not paying $15 an hour to his low-level staffers. He's paying a $6,000 a month salary with very generous benefits.
Yep.
He's doing that because it's smart business. And it's also smart business to put some of your lower-level employees on your board for exactly the reason you just said, Corey. You don't necessarily have to force people to do things. The government does have a monopoly on violence, and there are times when you need to have really strict regulations. But let's have a debate. The interesting debate is about what are those times? Where do you draw the line? Specifically.
And again, my favorite thing about Yang and our conversations, frankly, Rio, you and I, is that the looking at the solution that allows for more choice and more freedom, if that thing exists, is something I didn't really do that all that often, right? Like I was, and still am, quite frankly, regardless, completely and totally for killing Citizens United. I think it's ridiculous, right? But democracy dollars is 1,000 times smarter, better, and will actually get accomplished faster and actually produce better results than just getting rid of Citizens United, right?
It also increases the odds that you will kill it down the road.
Right, exactly. But it's a solution that comes in and crystallizes what people really want, which is more power, decentralized in a democracy, and less power, and regulatory capture by the rich, without having to, have a sort of an authoritative push from the top.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. And it's also, frankly, it could be that it's so effective and so inexpensive, right? it's a drop in the bucket in comparison to what we spend on, pencils probably as the government. I don't think that's an exaggeration. It's not that expensive of a policy. And it could be so effective at drowning out special interest money that you have essentially solved the problem without having to violate the rights of your citizens in order to do it. You're actually giving the citizens more power as opposed to taking it from them. There are times when you need to take it from them. But I mean, if somebody wants to donate money to a political campaign, I personally think they should be allowed to. I think that it should have to be transparent. I think that people should be able to attack you and say, "Why are you taking money from oil companies?" And in a world with democracy dollars, politicians would stop doing it because the cons of being attacked for it would outweigh the pros.
Yeah, I mean, your incentives would be to actually go and talk to people and see what they want.
And it doesn't require a constitutional amendment, which is an extremely difficult thing to do.
Right. And it's a rounding error in the budget.
It's very easy. I actually like Pete Buttigieg, but it's very easy to say, I support, a constitutional amendment to get rid of Citizens United. All right, great. That's not something the president can do,
Right.
Embrace democracy dollars. That would be you can do that.
Yeah, exactly. Getting rid of Citizens United is hard. And yeah, I'm repeating what Rio just said. Seth, how are you feeling, man? I'm sorry. We got all fucking riled up.
No, I'm good. I can't help but think, what's the point? We all agree on these things, but we as a country failed to have this conversation. We failed to talk about things that really mattered, and now we are heading towards a election cycle that fundamentally does not deal with the core issues that the first world is dealing with in relation to the fourth industrial revolution. If you acknowledge the ways in which populism, tension, geopolitical turmoil is directly linked to industrial disruption and the fact that we're on an exponential pace, I've been spending my past couple days I'm pretty down in the dumps at the moment because it just feels like we've failed. I don't know.
Oh.
Let me help because I actually called Greg. I was talking to Greg this morning because I was utterly hopeless about this particular election. Between the three of us, I'm pretty sure we're going to lose unless something really dramatic happens, which is still possible. And everyone should get out and do the work anyway. But I have been thinking about automation and AI and the exponential increase in technology for 6, 7, 8 years. I've been thinking and reading about UBI for 4 years. If you'd have told me this year that we'd be talking about UBI at all, I would have fucking laughed at you. Right? So the idea that there is now a real coalition of human beings on YouTube and on shows like this and on the UBI caucus and working with Scott Sands, who now has a fucking army, right? That is a huge win. That is a step that you cannot go back from. You can't unring this bell. And the biggest thing is, do we all want this to go much faster because we know it needs to go faster? Yes, 100%, right? But the ball's rolling now. One of the things that Yang always said, looking at how hard it is to go from zero to where we are right now, ultimately didn't end up proving true because money's a bitch. But he got so many things into the conversation that never would have been before, and created a real organization of human beings that isn't going away. Mm-hmm. And that growth will itself be exponential. Not necessarily in this cycle, but there will still be more Yang Gang visible stuff happening in this presidential cycle. Yang being at CNN, they keep turning to him hey, what do you think about this? Right? Mm-hmm. That is huge. Right? Yeah. Did you guys see the numbers on CNN viewership every time he was on?
They went up, I'm guessing.
They were bananas. Like 5 or 6x bananas. Yeah. Right? So we can't forget that the real movement is speaking these ideas into the Overton window in a way that cannot be ignored, right? And yes, it's going to take a longer than we want to move the Democratic Party, to where we need them to be. Yeah. And they're going to fight us clearly, right? Which I wasn't expecting, right? But it's happening. So that's the fight. There we are.
So companies that can afford to pay people a lot are already going to pay them a lot. And the forcing mom and pop shops in Wisconsin to pay the same amount as Starbucks in Seattle That's not going to stop the problem of automation. That's going to hurry it up, right? You can try to force companies to put people on the board. You can force companies to pay more wages. You can force companies to do all the things you want. The actual consequence of that, combined with a federal jobs guarantee, will be that private corporations will be forced to automate faster and faster and faster. Oh, we have to put someone on our board? Like, first of all, it would be smart of them to do it. It would be good business, and a lot of them already are doing it for that reason. But a lot of people resent being told they have to do it. And so, like, they're going to look at this and say, boy, you guys are just making it really expensive and a real pain in the ass to employ human beings. We're going to get the damn robots to do it. So the private industry, which is where all the money is made, is going to be done by a bunch of robots, and then just a few executives at the top and some very smart programmers in Silicon Valley are going to be making a lot of money. And everybody else is going to be a wage slave of the federal government. That is the thing. That is not a good idea. And when I bring that up with Bernie Bolsheviks, they will sometimes tell me, well, we should just outlaw automation. Seriously, that's what they say.
Yeah, no, I know.
Talk about being a Luddite. But here's the thing. All right, fine. Outlaw automation. What's that going to do? Every smart company is instantly going to leave the United States and go somewhere where they can automate. The U.S., the GDP of the United States will
crater,
implode, right? Crater. That's a better word. I mean, and then how are you going to pay for your federal jobs guarantee? You know, there are only two candidates running right now who want to shut down the borders and just create a little nationalist economy. And those are Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. And it's a stupid idea. It's the 21st century, you guys.
So just to give you a few more talking points here, it's not even it's cheaper to employ humans. It's also 10 times more effective. Like, it's been shown that self-serving kiosks encourage people to spend up to 30% more per visit, because they're not having, like, a lot of people want extra cheese on their nachos, but they have a little bit of like self stigma when they're telling that to another human. No, for real. Like, people go all out.
I never would have thought of that. Like, I mean, this person.
I have no shame. I'm just buying 20 bottles of wine. That's all I'm
getting. But I get, like, where, you know, like going to a kiosk and like, no, I want 10 more fries.
Oh yeah,
this robot does not fucking care.
Yeah,
I did not think of that. That's a good point.
3 extra patties, hell yeah, ring me up. They put the objects right next to it. You know, this is why they, like, if you've ever worked in a service industry, they are always trying to teach you how to upsell more, where people do it themselves, basically. If you take the human out of the equation. So not only is it cheaper to get robots, not only are robots on a curve downwards in cost year over year, just based on Moore's law and the efficiency of the market, but it's also just, it makes more sense as a corporation. And Rio's exactly right, is that us deciding not to do something isn't going to stop the rest of the world from doing it. I was bringing this up. There was a Lev Parnas video where he was sitting talking to Trump in with a group of lobbyists, group of high society people trying to get their policies through to Trump at this dinner. It was an hour and 11 minutes long, like an hour and 30 minutes long. Right at the hour and 11 minutes, they speak about self-driving trucks, because they had just gotten done. People in the trucking industry were talking about how all of these regulations are really killing the business, because the truck stops driving at 16 hours. The tech that's in there forces people to stop driving, and they could be 15 minutes away from home and they have to pull over on the side of the road. So now there's this shortage of truckers. We need you to work on this, Trump. And Trump turned around and said, oh, aren't they coming out these trucks that don't have anyone in them? And the guy said, yes. And all of the technology is there. It's all there. We're just waiting on regulation. So in the meantime, we need you to work on this. But the guy who was lobbying it said that it was coming. Trump knows about it. And I was speaking to this about a conservative person who's still in Trump's camp. And I'm saying, listen, if Trump wins again, we're not any better off, because... And he says something about they're never going to let those jobs go, because then how will anyone make any money? They're not going to put these trucks. He did. And I said, I said, listen, 45,000 people die every single year in traffic related incidents. Your obsession with having people employed is saying, I would rather people die than not have a job. This is so problematic. And China right now is building cities from the ground up where they have avenues for self-driving transportation and pedestrians on the other. Like they're fundamentally creating cities with this in mind and creating the logistical framework to create smart cities, super cities. They're about to leave us behind. We don't have time. We do not have time. We don't have the moral ability to let people continue to die. And these millions of men who are spending so much time away from their families working, and like the response I got to that was, these people work those jobs because they want to get away from their families. And I'm like, okay, listen, but still, it's such a moral outrage to be dealing with this work obsessed society.
Such a pretty picture about their life.
I know, and that's what capitalists will always do. Look at me, calling out the capitalists to say, listen, this is a beautiful, beautiful system that we live in. When in fact, no, it's killing a lot of people.
Yeah, we need to be able to talk about what is wrong with capitalism writ large.
Can I say what it is?
Sure.
Yeah. Yes.
It's not capitalist. It's kleptocratic. That's the problem. In anything you're going to name that is a problem with capitalism, it's going to be that it's not capitalist.
I would say the one thing that I have a massive problem with is the paradox of trickle down, like to imagine, because labor is always going to be on the chopping block. The things that make capitalism great are the fact that, it's super efficient, competition's going to drive out the weak. It's kind of this Darwinistic thing that winds up benefiting everyone, except it doesn't, because the only way that a large portion of the segment of the society benefits from that system is if they actually get something from it, which is just they don't. If you can close the loop by actually providing an avenue for that to happen, UBI, exactly.
Yeah. No, I'm fine with that. Like, obviously, I'm. Capitalism is just honestly what capitalism is. Adam Smith's argument is basically just the natural state of an economy when people are allowed to own private property. That's what it is.
Except where labor is a thing, it ignores the fact that it doesn't see human beings as anything other than cogs in a machine.
Right, because it's not a government system. It's just a natural economic state. So what we need is government plans like a UBI, which are designed to solve problems that the market by itself can't solve. I'm fine with that. What I don't like is so capitalism is when you have a separation of the state and business. That's what capitalism is. The state regulates business just like it regulates everything else, right? But they don't merge into one thing, right? Now, in communism, you have the state owning the business, and in kleptocracy, which is what exists in Russia and China and Trump wants to create here, is when business owns the state. In both cases, they merge into one thing. Decentralization is good because absolute power corrupts absolutely, and you do not want all the power consolidated into one combination of gigantic big government / big corporations. Like most of us, if we really reflect upon that, can get it. It's not that complicated of an idea. But part of the problem is not only do we have people like Bernie Sanders lying about what socialism is, he's lying about what capitalism is. Capitalism is not the problem. The problem is the fact that corporations are buying the government.
I love that distinction.
Okay.
That's the thing. Like when we start using terms instead of actual, whether it's policy things or ideas, it can cause a lot of unnecessary confusion.
UBI and democracy dollars, guys. So what do we do to keep this moving forward? How do we grow this movement? Even with, like individualistic assholes like myself and bleeding hearts like Corey, we're all going to work together. What's the plan?
So how are you guys feeling about your show specifically? What is your plan for your show?
Corey, do you want to answer that?
Sure. The way, and we actually talked a little bit about this last night, and we talked about what we were going to do after Yang got out of the race months ago. It personally, to me, is too important to keep this conversation going to stop. Because, and again, I cover sort of politics writ large, 3 days a week or whatever. We do a lot of this stuff. I'm not getting a lot of hope from that. It's this nexus where we're talking about what it will mean to be post-partisan. We're talking about what it would mean to have solutions that will actually move things forward, pun intended, that personally give me hope. This is the work. This is what I don't want to stop. Right. And yeah, we talk about like different things that we might do. Like we're doing the blog now because Real's awesome and got that started. And we're going to do some different things with Patreon and we're going to do some different things with the Buzz Book Club. Blah, 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 blah.
Patreon.
So it's full steam ahead for us. Like, it really is. Like that. Like, and actually we have more Patreon supporters in the last week than we got in the last month.
Whoa.
Right. I mean,
because now they're not sending the money to Yang anymore.
Right.
Also, by the way, thank you guys very much. Corey and I are not taking any money for ourselves yet. Maybe someday. What we're going to do is we're going to save it up and we're going to spend it on advertising so that we can grow the movement, so that more people hear our message of not left, not right, but forward.
Yep.
Or I prefer to say left and right and forward. They're two ways of saying the same thing. Because I truly believe that, democracy is compromise. Liberalism, classically understood, not used as a synonym for social liberalism, but just liberalism, strictly speaking, is basically just the idea that conflict is inevitable. And so you have to create incentive structures, which Yang is a genius at understanding.
So good.
You have to create incentive structures that bring out the better angels of people's nature. So democracy is about channeling the inevitable conflict, political conflict, in a productive direction through compromise. And, you guys write down the time, Corey, all right? Karl Marx had a lot of good points.
Whoa.
Okay.
Whoa.
He wasn't God, right? Milton Friedman also has a lot of good points. We need to get the smartest people in the world together and come up with solutions that thread the needle. That's what democracy, when it's at its best, is supposed to be about. And that's what our show is trying to exemplify. And capitalism, by the way, is just about channeling the inevitable economic conflict, because human beings are competitive. You can't, unless you breed it out of us somehow. Right. Through eugenics or something, or genetic engineering, we're competitive. That's how we are. And so capitalism is about trying to channel that economic competition in a productive direction that grows wealth. And every time it's been tried, it's worked. But you guys are right. Like, the government has a role to play, and Adam Smith in Wealth of Nations argued that too. He said, right, you actually literally can't have capitalism or any rights. He was saying that capitalism is what happens when you give economic freedom to this people, right? You can't have any rights. You can't have civil rights. You can't have any kind of freedom without a state to, at a minimum, protect your freedoms from other people. And so that's the role that the government needs to be playing economically. Is it shouldn't be choosing favorites. It should be creating a fair floor for competition. And, a UBI index to GDP through a VAT is... It's the way to do it. I mean, it's the 21st century way to do it for sure. But I mean, Milton Friedman supported it.
Yeah,
Nixon supported it. Like, it's not a left or a right thing. It's forward is what it is.
I've been thinking about this a lot, and I want to make like a video which I'm putting so much thought into. I want it to be the best one that I've made so far, but it's specifically about this relationship to the idea of a universal basic income and how we can clearly see that it works based upon the same problem that Yang talks about in his book, this epidemic of young men, prime working age men, leaving the workforce to sit around and play video games all day, which is what I did up until the point that I made this channel. I saved up as much money as I could, and I was like, I'm going to stop and be a video game streamer. When you say that we are competitive by nature, you're inherently right. I think the things that we need to look at as for why these men are leaving the workforce and choosing gaming instead is because gaming inherently has the ideology of a universal basic income baked within it. There is a fail state in any video game that you play where you reach the game over screen. You're not going to be stuck into a system of poverty, though. You can always hit the continue button and try again the next month or something or other. Month by month would it be. But people love these video games because they're able to flex their competitive muscles in some certain way. You're going to get a higher kill-death ratio, and you're going to flex about it on your friends and say, look, I succeeded. Look, I had this goal in mind. I continue to get better at it, and then I had something to show for it with this shiny new armor or something. Video games are simulation of what a good life feels like for competitive men. And it's what they would do if they had a universal basic income just naturally. They're not going to sit around and stop doing things. They're going to try and manifest a vision of the world that they want to live in, the passions, the visions that they have in their head is inherently what they're going to do. And you can't get around that fact. You can't get some kind of society in which everyone is equal, because that doesn't work. People want to feel a reward for the sweat of their brow. They want to feel like that they have merit, and that it's reflected on things that they get from what they do. They don't want things just handed out to them, as weird as that sounds coming from a universal basic income supporter, but that's the truth. So if we want people to start actually engaging and living in a competitive society that we exist in, we have to stop punishing people for failing.
Right.
And
well, the reason that a UBI isn't a typical handout is precisely why I support it. I liked it before automation was really even on the horizon, but it was still just kind of Star Trek thinking. Because what it is, and this is the reason that Milton Friedman liked it too, because the automation wasn't a problem in the 70s. But what it does is it creates a fair floor. So it takes the stigma away. People don't like handouts because, oh, I'm taking from that guy who has a family to support, and they're giving it to me so I can be lazy. They feel bad about it. Other people look down on it. Whereas if you have a dividend that is fairly distributed and every single citizen gets it, the rich get it, the poor get it, everybody gets it, that is a much more fair floor for competition. It really is capitalism that doesn't start at zero. And there's absolutely no shame in that. And you're absolutely right, Seth. People would, if anything, probably be more productive in that world. Yep. Because we still have passions. I mean, most of the progress that human race has been made by upper class people, because for most of human history, peasants, I'm sorry, it's true. There are exceptions. There are some genius peasants out there every now and then. But the truth of the matter is, even the geniuses are like, it's stacked against them. They're not likely to make big innovations because they're too busy just trying to feed their families, right? So for most of human history, the upper class were the people who were making the big innovations intellectually, technologically, you name it, morally even, right?
They had the time to get
because
bored.
they had the time, right? So this idea that passive income is a bad thing, or that you should be ashamed of it, that no, you really have to struggle, and you really we want competition, right? We want challenges. Like, that's why we play sports. Like, there's lots of ways to live a fulfilling life that don't involve flipping burgers for $15 an hour.
And I would argue that every single one of them is better than flipping burgers for $15 an hour.
Yeah, and I don't even necessarily have anything against people doing that. It's just that they're not going to need to anymore soon. Right now, I'm glad they do, because I like burgers, right?
Right.
No, and I make sure to tip them as well as I can afford. But
if burgers are your
going to do it, and you'll be better off for it, because there are other ways you could use your time. It turns out that when you don't have to spend 80% of your waking hours just trying to make ends meet, it actually frees you up to live a better life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
100%.
Can you imagine too, like there, and I've been talking about this with around automation and AI and stuff, like my buddy Dino, who makes these tank drums out of old propane tanks, like these magical weird ass musical instruments, right? An AI would make it infinitely better, would be more precise, would sound better, would be more perfect. I would never buy it from an AI, because Dino makes them by hand and paints them, right?
Oh, sure.
And on the same token, if everybody was getting a UBI and I had a choice to go get an AI created burger that was perfect, or go to Rio's burger joint where he just was really super passionate about making the best burger on the face of the earth, and made it himself and locally sourced all the things, made a narrative out of it. I would go to Rio and pay twice as much. And part of that is because we are hyper intelligent monkeys that are tribal, and we have been for the entire time that we've been sentient, and probably before that, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like, having that thing where as a human connection can then be an awesome thing that you could go and do.
Corey, that was an absolutely brilliant observation.
Thank you.
I'm
here all week.
Right. So the example that I would use is my wife collects these hand carved wooden puzzles, right? You can go buy a puzzle at Walmart for like $10-15, right? These hand carved wooden puzzles cost like $3 per piece, right? Because like a lady who is an expert at a craft that's left over from the Middle Ages hand carves these things that you could say, like, I want to have a Lhasa Apso shaped puzzle in this one, and it's crazy. It is way more challenging. It's much more. It's like an art form, is what it is. So here's the thing. Something that is valuable in part because because it's less, it's like less available, right? So like if you,
Scarcity, for sure.
yeah, right. So the reason why an original Picasso is valuable is because there's only one of them, right? But you could have AIs create as many copies as you want. The original is still going to have historical value. Museums are still going to want it. People are still going to want to have it in their homes. And so what will happen with the UBI and automation is human labor. This sounds a little crazy to say, but for the people who want to work and are passionate about what they're doing, it could actually result in human labor being more valuable.
Because honestly, I think it will for sure. I think you can calculate that straight line.
For one thing, the jobs that humans do still need to do, there's going to be fewer people in the job market because not everybody has to work. More people will choose to stay home. More people will choose to be entrepreneurs. More people will choose to raise their kids or whatever they want to do, right? And so that means that there's less supply of labor and that the wages will actually be higher than they would be without a UBI. I mean, now we still have to offset that against the way that automation is going to make certain kinds of labor obsolete, let alone less valuable, right? But I'm just saying, for the jobs that do exist, the wages will be much higher with a UBI. And you're right, Corey. That's what people will start to value. Specific kinds of things. Your fancy restaurants will still have wait staff, not because a robot can't do it, but because they're paying extra for the luxury of a human being there. And that person will be paid a lot of money because they will be very valuable to that restaurant.
And they'll fundamentally look at their job and what they do differently than they do now. Again, like you said, Marx had some points, and one of the things that he spoke about was the alienation of labor. And I'm feeling this right now as we speak. This past week and a half, I've been sitting down in front of this camera trying to make a video because I feel like I need to make a video. Like, people are supporting me. They are sending me cash that they have worked hard for every single month. And I've tried to say, listen, the idea of a universal basic income is that it's unconditional. So don't send it to me expecting anything in return. But that's insane. That is insane. No one is going to that's because that's charity, one. And two, it's just, that would actually be the case with a universal basic income. No one is actually giving this to you expecting something in return. And that expectation causes some problems because I'm sitting here thinking, what is the way that I can make the most money out of this video? It's going to compromise my integrity. I'm going to try and put lipstick on a pig. I'm going to make a clickbait title. I'll hire Anna Kasparian, right? Because my goal is to try and maximize how much money that I'm making because I need money to survive. And I've been kind of cast into the situation where okay, I have no idea if this channel is going to continue on in any way. I don't feel like making a video right now. That's making me feel guilt about not making content for my supporters, which then is just this vicious cycle going around and around and around, and it's stopping me from doing what I'm wanting to do and putting passion into it. Scott Santens talks about this a little bit, and how once he received his unconditional income, it fundamentally changed the way that his relationship to his work. It was suddenly something I could sell this, or I could give it away for free. That is up to my choice. I can put as much work into this or as little work into this as I feel is necessary, and know that it's not based upon what I like. I think that I can make a video and sit and go, wow, that didn't get as many likes as I would want, and then criticize myself on it. It adds an extra step when you are oh, that didn't get many likes. I'm not going to make enough money off of that video. I need to really rethink about what I'm doing right now. Sometimes we're going to fail. We live in a hyper-competitive society, yes, but failure is a part of competing. We have to allow people to fail, and that's how you unlock that potential. And we aren't always competitive. So I think there will be a lot of ways in which people will say, yeah, I'm not going to compete like that. I don't want to be the best YouTuber in the world. That's not really my passion. I'm just doing this to get by. It's weird. I'm in this unique position of really desiring this thing, but it's not quite the thing that I desire, because I'm going to eventually lose interest in it if I just view it as something that I need to do in order to pay the bills.
Yeah, there's the competitive angle on it that I think definitely people react to a lot, but there's also a deep desire to collaborate, right? As a thing that is a good in its own right. Mm-hmm. And there's, what if I want to spend, have $1,000 a month and just meditate myself into nirvana? Good. Mm-hmm. Do that, right? It doesn't all have to be sort of looked at through the lens of competition, which will be huge still. Like, it doesn't matter, but like there's going to be, it allows human beings to go out and just be the human beings that they want to be in that moment, right? At a super basic level, possibly. But, Rio, when we were talking about the higher price labor thing, which I think is just definitely an underappreciated thing about what UBI will do. It again allows AI to become rampant in the areas where it can be. It allows us to be, super tribal, hyper intelligent monkeys that want to, appreciate each other's art and each other's dinner and each other's burgers and all that kind of thing. All the while GDP is going up.
Yes.
And UBI being pinned to GDP allows us to feel that ownership of the collaborative structure that we're all part of. And I think that nobody really understands how amazing that will be. I don't think.
And by the way, another reason that wages will go up with the UBI, again, higher than they would be without it, still taking into consideration that automation is going to lower wages or eliminate jobs. I'm just saying, in that future, which is coming, whether you want it or not, wages are going to be higher with the UBI. Another reason for it is because you have negotiating power, right? Like, nobody is going to agree to do a job with a shitty boss who treats them like garbage and doesn't pay them enough if they know they have something they can fall back on. They have a fail safe. They have the game over screen, as Seth said, right? Like, so they're going to say, all right, I'll do that job because, I want, even more money than I'm getting now. Even when the UBI is 3 times as big, adjusted for inflation as it is now, some people are still going to want more, and that's okay. Also, they might be bored. Like, might as well earn some extra money. But what they're going to do is they're going to say, I'll do that job, but I need you to pay me this much, not that much, and I need you to treat me like a fucking human being. And I think that's only a good thing.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I spoke to a woman who was making virtual avatars for VR chat for $50 a pop. I mean, that's awesome. I would have loved one, but I didn't have $50 to spend on something. When you've got a little bit extra per month and it's going to come around the next month. Like, people think that poor people don't have financial literacy, and that's true. They don't have long-term financial literacy planning, but that doesn't mean that they don't spend on their basic necessities first and foremost.
Like, people that only have a horse and carriage aren't really good at driving race cars.
Right. Well,
they don't have experience at it.
Right. They've no need for it. Like, it's never occurred to them because you don't think about saving when you never have $10 extra per month. Right. It's just not how anyone's brain works.
Well, you're going to have a lot of people who spend the entirety of their universal basic income every single month. They're going to have to be taught how not to do that, why it's important to put a little bit away every single month. But you're not going to have a massive, unless it's like mental illness, unless there's some deeper kind of problem, you're not going to have people who are buying liquor and drugs instead of paying their bills, or, $50 VR chat avatars. So what is left over has the ability, like, we could get to the point where automation gets so good, GDP so high, that UBI that's tacked to the rate of automation makes it to where you have a very comfortable basic income and everyone enjoys the benefits, and you have these parallel economies of trade where all of a sudden making virtual reality avatars is a perfectly acceptable form of work, and that's a way that you can express yourself, and that meritocracy that we talked about, feeling rewarded for doing something and putting something into this world, will actually make sense. But again, we're so far away from all of this, right?
But this is the thing, we're not. Like, we are so much closer to it now than I ever would have expected. And I realized, we see that end result and, like, why the fuck aren't we doing this 5 minutes ago? Like, I get that feeling. I get it deeply. But the amount of progress that we've already made is really where we have to keep remembering that, right? Because that's what's going to be fuel, so that we're not feeling down about not having achieved economic nirvana yet, right? We're just super excited about the fact that, like, holy fuck, we're in the foothills now. Right now, we have to organize harder. We have to get more of this kind of content out there so that people really can share that vision, and we can get the last way there.
What is the worst case
scenario? The thing about making investments goes, I mean, it's not just a matter of them not knowing how to do it. A lot of people simply don't have enough money in order to make investments.
That was my race card.
And so people,
analogy.
a lot of critics of UBI say, like, well, nobody's going to be able to invest anything if all they're earning is $1,000 a month. Well, yeah, that's true. But what they're going to be earning is whatever they were earning before at $1,000 a month more. right? And when your income suddenly doubles, as it would in some people's cases, their expenses aren't going to double, right? You can make that argument, but it's a stupid argument. Obviously, that's not the way supply and demand works. You can't just double your rent because your tenant got a UBI tomorrow. That's not, it won't work. But so what happens is they have more money. They will actually buy a few more little luxuries, which is good for the economy, and they will invest some of it because they'll actually have the money for it. And the dividend is an investment. It is a share in the economy. So like the feedback loop from UBI and GDP is going to grow the pie, and then their share of that pie will stay the same size. It'll be the same share, right? But the dollar amount will go up. And so even if they don't invest any of it, they could find themselves being lower middle class 20 years later anyway, right? Without having saved a single dime, because their dividend has been growing along with everybody else's. Another criticism people use of the UBI is they say that if you they say every dollar that you give to someone who doesn't need it is a dollar that you're not giving to someone who does need it. And that's the argument for means testing. But here's the thing, they set the standard for means testing so low that a lot of people who need it aren't getting it, and also the hurdles that you have to jump over prevent them from getting it. So it's like I think they have a simplistic notion of what it means to need the money, right? If you're earning $20 an hour and you live in Los Angeles, you're hand to mouth. That is not enough money to live on in LA. That person can't qualify for the assistance programs because they're earning too much money, but they need it. A middle class family that has to pay 30% of their income in taxes, money that they can't afford to pay, that they would prefer to invest or to spend on their children's education, they need that money. So I really resent the idea that only the poorest of the poor actually need money. Some people need it more than others. That's true. Yeah. But at some point,
the idea, I would love to address the means testing
thing. Like I said,
thing.
even the poorest of the poor are also going to get more under the system because the means
that's exactly
prevents them from getting it too.
Right. That's exactly it. Like I get the mindset around means testing, right? Because in a zero-sum universe, in a resource limited universe, you want to help the people that need to help the most. I get that as a fundamental value, right? The problem is in where it has been tried, this means testing thing, the zero sum is always going to end up being too small. And the number of people that you're actually trying to help will always be not enough, because there will be those people that are like, why are you taking money from a middle class family to give to a poor person? I think the logic in that is fine. If the problem is they're taking from that family instead of billionaires, right? Whatever. But the thing is, right now we're in this universe where, because of the fact that UBI is like a non-means tested universal thing, because we get to imagine that. And I honestly believe that progressives that are still trying to stick to this means testing thing, it is not because they're authoritarian by nature. It's because they do not fully understand how a UBI will work yet. I honestly believe that. And it now will just be our job to paint that picture over and over and over again so that they believe that it's possible. Because if you look at whether you're TYT or anybody else, right, or the majority report, you sit in front of me and tell me that you'll withhold welfare, you'll withhold help to 70% of the people that should be on welfare that don't get it, so that you can maintain control over the 30% of the people that will. I will discredit you until you stop talking out loud in public, because it's bullshit.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, what you mean is 70% of people who qualify for benefits do not receive all the benefits they qualify for.
That's right. And again, to exactly your point, right?
People
maybe
who
they're
are
homeless,
already
maybe
on
they're not jumping through the hoops, whatever.
Most people who are already on welfare will be better off with $1,000 a month cash.
100%. Yeah. And they would pick it. Like,
and for the people who are better off without it, don't have to switch.
That's exactly it. And that's always been like the what?
As far as why it shouldn't stack, it's because the point is to help people get off of these programs, right? Yep. If your goal is to keep people dependent, then you don't like that. But a higher welfare cliff is still a welfare cliff. If you allow it to stack on welfare, then as soon as they take a job or start an Etsy or a YouTube channel, as soon as they're successful financially in the slightest little bit, they're going to lose it anyway, right? So what the UBI does is it says, look, you can go do those things and you have the welfare, you have it while you're doing it. And once you become successful, instead of losing it, it's just going to get replaced by this other thing.
Yeah, right? Everyone would pick that.
Well, it's like they want single payer healthcare, they don't want private insurance that people have worked so hard to get, because they think that it just doesn't work unless it's universal, and that applies until it's cash.
So here's the problem with that. The arguments against single payer healthcare are like, oh, I want choice, I want this, or like most of it is disingenuous, in my opinion. Having seen what a single payer healthcare system looks like, right? Like that is, I want to pick my, quite frankly, super shitty, very, very expensive insurance because I had to work for it. Makes absolutely no sense. You could
That's
be
the point. That's the point that I'm making.
Less.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because imagine you were saying, "Oh, I want the $700 welfare that I spent 3 months applying for,"
Sorry.
instead of the universal amount that I'm going to per month. So they're like, the entire problem is, it's not that welfare is stacking or not stacking. It's the fact that means tested welfare is means tested welfare. That it is a problem with the means testing, not a problem with anything else in general. And it's just so beyond me that they're being so picky and choosy about what is universal and what is not. And that Sanders says, oh, we need universal programs. But like fundamentally, when you get into the weeds about that and you actually start to talk about it, there's no absolute way that it can work. Because if it's universal, you don't have to prove it. You don't have to prove your need. So it's like double speak coming from this branch. And I think you might be right. The place in which our content, as creators who are getting the word out there, can be most beneficial is to point out these inaccuracies, these inconsistencies as they come along, and make them own up to what exactly it is they're saying. Because it always boils down to capitalism is evil. Capitalism is evil. Even though all of the countries that we look towards and fawn over for these progressive ideas, they aren't like complete socialist countries like we've talked about.
VAT. Every one of those social democracies that the Bernie Bolsheviks say are like, that's what we want, that's our model, they all have a VAT.
That's exactly.
But the VAT is regressive, right? Well, over there, it's not even used to fund a UBI. So it actually is more regressive over there than what Yang's proposing. And they still point to these societies as like shining beacons on a hill.
Yeah,
I want to get to
it's everything that they accuse Yang of is only true about their side.
Yeah,
it's projection.
Yeah,
so sad.
I mean, like it's true. Well, the thing that's not allowed to stack is welfare. Well, ask them why they won't let welfare stack on your job.
Yeah,
burn. Yeah. That's a good point.
Right.
So Anthony Benners, I want to get he's mentioned this a couple times in the comments here. He was suggesting earlier, Seth, that you make a video around with some of the people in the UBI caucus and some of their varying policies. That's actually one of the things that Rio and I are doing in the Moving Forward podcast. You can go to movingforwardpod.com, motherfuckers. But I would love to see you do that as well, Seth, because I think there is no limit to the amount that we should be promoting the UBI caucus and their differences, right? Like we can have some really interesting conversations where people have different ideas. I know. There are some variabilities in the ways that we would actually get this stuff going. So he said, how many of the candidates in the UBI caucus support UBI without means testing? I think all of them, versus those who support UBI as a right of citizenship, thus truly universal. I would be interested to see if there were any in the UBI caucus that thought means testing was a good idea, because like honestly, the second you add means testing, that's no longer universal. It's not UBI, it's just welfare.
That's agreed. Yeah. And that's part of the reason why when, the Bernie Bolsheviks say like, well, we like UBI, we just think it should be means tested. It's like, okay, that we already have that. It's called welfare.
Yeah.
So that's not a UBI. No, I would venture to say everybody in the UBI caucus supports something very similar to the freedom dividend.
I think so too.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to seeing y'all's discussions with these candidates and everything. I'd have to restructure my format a bit. I've never really, because I've done an interview type thing of that nature, but I think that's important. I think getting these people out and amplifying their voices in whatever way possible is going to do tremendous good. We've got to play the political game. That's what sucks so much now. It's like, oh no, now we have to do local politics, and I hate local politics.
Don't.
Yeah,
like the local politics thing. I know it's smaller, but we can actually do way more damage locally than we could ever do nationally. Right?
That's because I live in a red state. So,
but that's the thing. There are conservatives that you could find. Share fucking Rio with them, and they're like, wait a minute. The people who are conservative.
If he lives in a red state, I'm not their kind of conservative.
there are some of them. There's some of
They
them.
would
right?
hate me so much.
But here's
I
the
get-
thing, like I go back to my buddy Mears, who's in Pasco County, a very red county, right? And all of his friends who aren't named Corey are, Trump kids, sadly, right? He took one listen to the Rogan interview and was 100% on board. Like, it blew my skull wide open. And I thought that must be a one-off. There's no way this could possibly be true in two conservatives. And then I met Rio. I'm like, oh, this is like a real thing.
Yeah, the reason the Rogan interview is so persuasive is because Rogan has this uncanny ability to ask like the dumbest possible questions. Like, he asks what all the idiots are asking. If Corey and I were interviewing somebody, if Corey and I were interviewing Andrew Yang, we would be like, well, that would be a dumb question because that's an obvious answer. I'm not going to ask that. But what Rogan does is he asks all the questions that people who don't know what they're talking about, and the low hanging fruit, like kind of stupid questions. This isn't a blow on Rogan. I'm just saying, like, that's what makes it effective, because he actually took the time over 2 hours to break down all the reasons why those are stupid questions. Like, sometimes you have to ask it because then Yang gets to explain the answer. Otherwise, all those stupid questions are floating around in the viewer's head and they never get answered.
That's a good point.
Yeah, no, that's huge, right? I think that's actually one of the things I go back to our conversation with Zoltan a bit. And I should have asked some of the tougher questions that I wanted to ask about his funding mechanism. He's actually out talking about them now, right? And he's talking about them in the sense that, hey, I'm running in a Republican primary. This is sort of the way to speak to them or whatever. Like, he's got compelling answers to that. So like it not pressing him on that actually made the conversation less valuable. Because I think candidates are going to want that kind of pushback. Right? You want to have people asking those kind of questions because it allows them to have the opportunity to answer them. Which just basically kind of restated your point about how Rogan did his.
So how do we think everybody did in the debate? I don't want to like get sucked into the horse race, but this is debate talk. So, I mean, I personally thought that Bloomberg stood up rather well. I think he knew he was going to be attacked. I think people who went in hating Bloomberg came out still hating Bloomberg. I think people who went in liking Bloomberg, I don't think he lost a lot of people. I think that they saw him stay calm. And I think that he responded to the questions. He was instructed to be calm, and I think that it actually worked. I think if he had gotten angry and defensive, that it would have hurt him a lot more. I'm not saying, but obviously some blows landed, right? I'm not denying that, but I'm just saying, like, he responded about as well as he could have. I thought Pete, you disagree.
Well, yeah, but you finish your lineup, and then we'll let Seth talk.
Well, I don't know my lineup. I guess we could each do a lineup. I thought that like I said, Pete did a really good job differentiating himself.
Who's worse than best?
All right. I mean, like, good Lord, I don't know. I think honestly, probably Bernie Sanders came out the strongest because nobody bothered to he's running away with it. They didn't go after him enough, apart from Pete. But Pete, unfortunately, also attacked Amy, and I think it backfired on him because the way the attack was done made him look really bad. It made him look kind of mean. And Klobuchar is a nice, likable person, and watching him make her cry is just not it doesn't make me like Pete more. It makes
yeah.
So I'd say Sanders probably
did the best. Who did the worst? You think Pete?
No, because like I said, he also differentiated himself from Bloomberg and Sanders in a very smart way.
Okay.
I think Warren did the worst. I don't think she's going to get a bump.
Really? Oh wow. Mm-hmm. Oh,
I think she'll get some fundraising, but who is she going to take votes from? Bernie Sanders has it locked down.
Everyone but Bernie, which was her whole plan, and it will work.
Well, I guess that hinges on whether people perceive her as an establishment centrist moderate or not. I don't. So I just don't see her taking votes from Pete and Klobuchar. They're just so, but voters aren't rational. So.
A lot of voters aren't rational.
I think she did the worst because she should have gone after Bernie. I really
pragmatically. I'm weirded out that my argument around that isn't compelling to you. How many Bernie voters is she going to get? None.
No, but she needs to differentiate herself from him.
But that she already has.
I think the reason she's struggling is because
positions.
People perceive her as the female / less electable Bernie.
You might. That's not a common theme in the Democratic Party.
Well, my wife really likes Warren, and I don't know. I might even end up voting for her because I might as well vote for someone one of us is enthusiastic about. But if there's a but I mean, if a clear alternative presents itself to Bernie Sanders, that person has my vote.
And honestly, that's what Warren was doing. And once you get a little bit outside of your perception of her now, you'll see that she succeeded at doing it.
Okay.
We'll see how much, because Bloomberg still has $18 quadrillion to make that argument. Like that, everyone who isn't Bernie now has to fight over everything that's left, right? Anyway, so Seth, worst than or most favorite, least favorite.
I largely agree with that. I am interested how me and Rio perceive Bloomberg completely differently. I was only listening to it with headphones on, and from the moment the dude spoke, because I've never heard him speak before, this was my first kind of interaction with Bloomberg. Like, the dude sounded just like your most caricature Mr. Burns type-esque billionaire.
That's a plus for Rio. That's why you guys don't see it.
I mean, apparently, like, from the moment the dude started talking, I inherently disliked this person. But he's right.
Amen.
If you went in not liking that type of candidate, you're going to walk out not liking him either. So I think he did the worst. I actually think that Amy didn't. I mean, it's interesting that Rio says that he thinks Amy won out when Pete attacked her because she's nice and likable and it came off as mean. I don't think that would have been your takeaway if she was a male candidate, right? Because it's a little bit more appropriate to take off the gloves and fight and knock each other around. I mean, when she kind of came back and said, "I'm sorry, do you think that I'm dumb?" Well, kinda. You should have known.
No, that was a super weak response. Like, that didn't work for me at all.
Yeah. I mean, that was a moment where she took a huge hit. You didn't know the Mexican president's name. Like, come on. I understand that we all forget some things here and there, but this is a debate that we're talking about. It's a debate for the presidential election, and you have to minimize those scenarios as much as you can. And I think Pete benefited just from the fact that Bloomberg was there, and up until now, all of the attacks on Pete have been, oh, you have billionaire donors. Well, now there's an actual billionaire on the stage. So
yeah, it's almost cover.
All of that energy is focused on Bloomberg, and Pete can just kind of skirt right on by.
That's an interesting point.
And
yeah, I thought that Amy, actually, I'll say this. I thought Warren's strongest moment was when she defended Amy.
Yeah.
She said, look, you guys, like, remembering a name or not is actually kind of trivia. What really matters is, do you understand, like, the nuances of trade with Mexico, right? That's what actually matters. And lots of people who would do well on Jeopardy don't know that. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a perfectly valid point, and it was very noble of her to say that, because it frankly, also because I was tired of so much of the debate being wasted on whether or not she remembered this guy's name. It was like, come on, let's talk about something else.
Not that big a deal.
There's no way in hell that Donald Trump knows the Mexican president's name. He's got a cabinet full of people who are going to, like, whisper it into his ear when he's on the phone making that call.
100%.
You know? So I agree with that point overall, but I do think that, like, Amy has never performed in a way where I left going, wow, she did well. But I'm always taken aback at how she's performed, better in the polls or the caucus. So what do I know? I like, Biden's in this weird place where, like Corey was talking about, all of the moderates are just being divided and chopped up, and it's all a winner take all. I don't think Biden did well enough in the debate to really kind of assume control over any of those votes that are going around.
That's right.
He was
Even though, like, he did all right. That's the thing. Like, he has become forgettable, and I don't want to toot my own horn. Just kidding. I'm totally going to do it. I said Biden wasn't a thing from the jump, and I was right.
Corey, I've been reflecting on what you said about Warren. There are some key differences between her and Sanders. And when I started saying, like, I don't know, maybe I'll just vote for her because my wife likes her, I asked, like, why am I okay with that? Well, because she calls herself a capitalist. And in the debate, she said it again. Sorry. Yep. Guilty as charged. I'm a capitalist. So are you, Bernie, but whatever, Right. So, like, that was a good moment for her that helped differentiate herself from him. Maybe I wasn't giving her enough credit. Maybe she was differentiating herself from both Bloomberg and Sanders, which is what I think the person who comes out as the alternative to Sanders needs to do.
Yeah.
If it's not going to be Bloomberg.
She definitely did the whole time.
Well, yeah. And has been
the whole time.
Her Medicare for All plan, she actually has a plan for how to pay for it. Bernie Sanders doesn't. She's liked by the establishment, mainly because she's not an asshole to them.
She's
That's a
actively
huge advantage over him in terms
Yeah.
of actually being an effective president.
Yep.
So I could see her coming out as the clear middle ground between Bloomberg and Sanders.
Yeah. So, sorry, Seth, did you want to do more on yours?
Yeah, I'll just end it really quickly. The one thing that Biden did do kind of well was that even he got on the train and attacked Bloomberg, but he stumbled his way across a sentence and still finished with a slap across Bloomberg's face. But if we're talking about who did the best based upon how much slop they throw towards Bloomberg, it was obviously Warren. From the get-go, in 20 seconds, she used the word horse-face lesbian and hold on, no, I had this written down here.
It was,
Horse-faced lesbians and fat broads. I never thought in my life I would hear that on the debate stage last night, but way to go, Warren, really packing the punch from the get-go. She set the tone for the rest of the debate. And I think she would come in second, and Bernie just overall had, I agree with Rio's point on Bernie probably just being the front runner by virtue of no one else really, trying to take him down and doing it effectively, at least.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Trying to take Bernie down is going to have the opposite result, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going after Bernie is only going to make his supporters more fervent. That's just the thing. That's real, right? So I get it from an ideological point of view. We all want to see it happen. It won't do anything, right? So just saying something to have it said isn't it like that to me now. My prime directive now is Trump is not allowed to be president again, right? So moving backwards from there, again, it's like I think Bloomberg did worse in the debate because he literally came off as a failure the whole time, right? And again, Warren set that up by brutalizing him, and why Warren is my absolute she ran away with this debate, running away, is she knows the votes that are gettable are non-Bernie votes, all of them.
If she actually wants to win and she's not just running for VP or whatever, or just trying to help Bernie, she should embrace a UBI policy and get Yang's endorsement.
Well, okay, let's not get ahead of us because I want to talk a little bit about that because I agree with you on that because it'd be super smart to do. Bloomberg got completely and totally eviscerated. He shouldn't have done that debate. Didn't have enough time to prepare, and his answers for things that he knew were going to come were feckless. They were just bad, and he stumbled over all of those. They just weren't good, right?
I think he came off like a little smug, and okay.
But that's a little smug for you, Rio.
I'm going to be bankrolling whoever the nominee is, and
that's
you guys are all
smug.
attacking me. Now, Warren did have a good, the best attack she made on him was when she said, hey, why don't you just put your money in the race and stay out of it yourself? I thought that was a legitimate, fair question. And
release the NDAs.
Yeah.
Right?
Lord, I don't want to get into that.
Honestly,
legally,
he's got, but listen, I'm saying the reason is there's a lot of women who vote in the Democratic Party, and it's a very, very honest thing to be like, hey, should we have a misogynist in there? The biggest thing that Elizabeth Warren did, so many people have said there's no way she could go toe to toe with Trump. She would beat Trump with a severed fucking arm behind the woodshed every day of the week, watching what she did to Bloomberg. Right? That's
why she did it. Maybe
that's exactly why she did it.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
You want to run a misogynist, arrogant billionaire? I'll fuck that motherfucker up in front of live TV. And she did it. Right? That to me is game over. And watch Democrats react to that. Now, the biggest question is, will that actually affect the $400-500 million that is going to get spent before Super Tuesday? And I don't know the answer to that. Bloomberg could survive this for sure. And we'll just have to see how it
watches
goes.
the debates. They're going.
20 million people did though.
Yeah, Bloomberg's ads are really good. What they're going to do is they're going to take some clips of a couple of the best things that he said, and they're going to put those out, and people are going to see them over and over and over and over and over again. And he's going to control the narrative that way. But within the context of the debate, I think you persuaded me, Corey. I think Warren did a lot better than I originally gave her credit for, because she was differentiating herself from Sanders, but in a nicer way, which is kind of actually Yang's thing.
And she's going to get earned media.
Yang would not have been so vicious and uncivil with Bloomberg, because that's not his style.
But
well, personally, it turns me off. I don't if I was part of what I don't like about Trump is that he's not a classy person. He doesn't behave presidentially. And I think that it reflects poorly on any candidate when they get too dirty. in their attacks.
Yeah, I don't actually see anything that she did as dirty in any way, shape, or form. But
It was
I kind of get that.
I don't even like attack ads, frankly. You know,
Well,
like I
get
welcome
that.
the attack ads of Trump
Right.
at Trump, but just because I feel like if you're going to be the
Amen.
bully in chief, if you're going to put it out, you should be able, dish it out. You should be able to take it.
Right.
But
The biggest thing with Yang, though, like
yeah.
he didn't come out against the federal jobs guarantee and do the gray overalls thing on live TV, and he should have done it. So the thing is, like, if you're not going to have a $2 billion, if you're not going to have $2 billion to run a campaign, you need earned media to survive, right?
Okay.
And to get earned media, you have to do something that will get their attention. You don't have a choice, right? This isn't Pinochle, right? Whatever the fuck Pinochle is, I don't know where that word came from.
You know the way Democrats think better than I do. So,
but no, but like you need to know how the media works. And honestly, like Trump is honestly the best at this. He says the dumbest thing that could possibly come to anyone's mind every time, and the news cannot look away.
No, it's kind of like why Rogan is popular. You know, like people who are below average intelligence, which is about 50% of the population. Okay.
Well,
are not used to
average,
are not used to seeing people talk like them on television, right? And it makes them feel validated.
Yeah. You're right. And Yang understood this. According to his post commentary, he said, listen, the people who get the most money at the end of it are the ones who pull through. And the people who get the most money into it, the way all the other candidates are acting are, hey, it's gloves off time. I'm going to get out there and really try. I guess, yeah, I would have loved for Yang to say, listen, it's time for us to really talk about this. Like, so your problems with the way that Bloomberg was treated, would it have been different? Like, because my entire thing is if Sanders is going to be pushing against billionaires, the way to do it is to say, Mike, you've made X amount of money in the past 10 minutes, right? Because one of the things that really expanded my consciousness on this problem of inequality was the fact that Jeff Bezos was making $160,000 every 60 seconds. He was making 4 times what an average American worker makes in a year every single 60 seconds that he breathes. And I understand that a lot of that is tied up into his personal ownership stake of Amazon, and it's not entirely right to say that that's cash in hand, but you expand the definition of inequality into saying, look at how much wealth there actually is. Mike, you've been standing here for 3 minutes and you've already made more than one of the people watching tonight will make in their entire year. Like, how do you justify that? Would you be more appreciative of that approach when it came to attacking Bloomberg than what you saw during the debates?
Yeah, it was mostly the tone of voice that I found inappropriate. I think that, and
so
also, frankly, just the way that they they ganged up on him. And I'm telling you, anybody who is even a little sympathetic to the fact that Bloomberg is this incredibly generous benefactor for the Democratic Party thought that was a huge mistake.
Did you see his answer though to the why should you have all that money? Well, I worked hard for it. No, you fucking didn't. Fuck off.
Well, he did come from a lower middle class background originally.
Honestly, that's okay.
At some point, he did a lot of hard work. He really did.
At hard work, he didn't do any hard work. He was smart. There's a difference.
Right. If working hard,
smarter, not harder.
That's exactly right.
I'm all for that. And
we don't need hard work anymore.
No, we don't. That's exactly it. Right.
You know we should start wrapping this up, and I got to get this out. So one thing that I tell Bernie Bolsheviks when they say like, oh well, you're an evil capitalist and you're just exploiting my labor. What I tell them is, well, soon enough, we're going to be exploiting robots and you guys are going to be missing us.
Yeah, well, that's part of the problem, too, is they'll come back and say, well, if you let automation come across and do everything, well, then they've got no use for us.
But and this is the thing, like, this is why I really want to help as many people as possible get out of the labor mindset. Because look at what you're arguing for.
Yeah.
You're arguing for being given a shovel and wasting your whole fucking life on this planet doing meaningless bullshit so the robot won't do it.
Right.
What we really need to do is make sure that you make a share of that robot hour.
Yeah.
So that you can go and do anything you want. Like that's the idea that you're trying to constrain yourself into some like ridiculous gray coverall on purpose makes no sense.
Something else about the VAT that they miss is that a lot of money that the VAT will capture doesn't actually involve a consumer giving any money. to anything, right? So every time that there's a Google search, right, you do a Google search, you're putting money into your dividend when you do that. If you share something on Facebook, you're putting money into the dividend when you do that. And it's not costing you anything out of pocket. It's literally just being captured from one huge corporation to another huge corporation.
Yeah, we're making Twitter money every single time that we tweet. We are the employers for the employees for these companies. So any kind of system that goes forward without recognizing that and rewarding that with an unconditional cash dividend is inherently not a progressive policy whatsoever. It's allowing the status quo to continue 100%. They want people making tacos just for the sake of making tacos instead of allowing us to enjoy the tacos of the world that are made by robots instead of humans. I'm trying to segue into a certain. If it's
we've upgraded because we can't call Andrew Yang our taco anymore.
What's up?
Well, he will be forever our taco.
Yeah,
that is true. That is true. That the t-shirts and stickers that need to come out with that will always be factual. However, we're sort of migrating or evolving into something like Humanity First is our gumbo.
Gumbo?
Yeah, that was Scott's, because Scott was the one who started the taco thing, right? So we were talking about how to evolve this. He's like, a gumbo is kind of the analogy that I like, because all the pieces in a gumbo all remain themselves. The sausage is still the sausage, the potato is still the potato, whatever. I don't fucking know what goes into a gumbo. He said it better than I did, but it's not like you're gonna puree it and make it all one thing. Right?
Yeah, no, if you were to puree it and make a smoothie out of it, it would be absolutely
gross.
Disgusting. And that's the problem with cults of personality like Bernie Sanders and Trump. You are allowed in, but only if you sign on the dotted line of every single dogma, whatever the great leader says has to be believed, man.
Yeah.
Yang Gang isn't like that. We maintain our independence. We have our own views. We don't have to agree with Yang about everything. And Humanity First is like that too. Like, we share common goals and we can have meaningful debates. And like the whole point of Humanity First is to thread the needle. It's about bringing people together, not blending them up into one disgusting massive like groupthink.
Did we lose our only chance at that for this election cycle?
We didn't at all. It's going to be a lesser version, but I think it exists. And Elizabeth Warren was on Lawrence O'Donnell last night. I was listening to it this morning. And she was talking about bringing in ideas from Kamala Harris. She was talking about bringing in ideas from Jill Arend. She needs to be talking about bringing in ideas with Yang, and I'm telling you, eventually she will. I firmly believe that. And so we'll see that she's actively creating a coalition. Bernie Sanders has ads up right now saying that if you're with the billionaires, Pete, who's taking money from billionaires, and now Elizabeth Warren, who's explicitly not disavowing PAC money anymore, which, again, I have feelings about that, but I'm with her for this, right? I know Rio could care less, but
I really don't care.
Bernie Sanders is actively dividing the Democratic Party from itself, right? Like, that deserves to lose.
Yes.
Because if you don't have a unified Democratic Party, I'm telling you, it's a 1% race. You're going to fucking lose. And right now with the DNI thing, like that DNI, who was a total psychopathic asshole put in there by Trump, who had the audacity to do his job, going to Congress, the Intel Committee, to tell them the Russians are hacking the election again. Trump fires him 24 hours later and brings in a right-wing fucking blogger, right? The right-wing blogger who's been literally like passing messages to Kalimnik, who's a Russian oligarch. Like, they're going to steal this election. It can't be a 1% race. It has to be 5%. It's got to be the most ridiculous landslide in the history of fucking the American states that we understand it. You either do a coalition or we fucking lose. Sorry, I'm getting a little upset about that. But that's the thing. So Bernie Sanders cannot do that. And his turnout machine that's going to bring out way more voters, his turnout machine is failing.
It's like
it's not working.
It's like his goal is to get Trump reelected. That's the way he's behaving.
Honestly, like that, I used to think in 2015, 2016, when he was an actual unifier, because he could have brought the country together. Not like this.
But part of the problem is that they did maintain their ground game, and Yang Gang needs to do this, you guys. Yang could run in 2024. He could run for Senate. I mean, he could do any number of things, right?
Yep.
So we need to be building a ground game just like Bernie Sanders' movement did, but without coalescing into a cult of personality. Right?
That's right.
But like during that time that all of these Bernie Bolsheviks have only been talking to each other, they've created the ultimate bubble, right? and they've radicalized each other. And now 4 years later, they've just gone off the deep end. I mean, even in 2016, again, as a never Trump Republican, which means Trump supporters did not like me. There is nothing that a Trump supporter hates more than a never Trump Republican, or now ex-Republican. But back then I was still one. There's nothing they hate more. But they weren't the ones telling me that I needed to be guillotined for my views. They weren't the ones telling me that I needed to be thrown in a gulag. They weren't the ones saying that my home should be taken away from me and that my business should be seized by the state. No, that only came from Bernie Bros, and they've only gotten more vicious since then. If you think that kind of behavior is acceptable, you are not part of Humanity First, you guys.
Yeah, I have to agree.
I feel like we need to say something to cheer Seth up before we close, though, because he looks pretty down. He's even got morose. He's got morose Keanu Reeves in the background. For the people listening to our podcast, you should know that the whole time that we've been doing this, there's a very sad Keanu Reeves sitting on a bench, a park bench behind Seth's head. It's very funny.
It's true. Go to the Dividend Report on YouTube and subscribe hard.
Well, like,
click that button.
Really, you guys have done wonders, because if it wasn't for you getting me on this episode right here, I don't know how long it would have taken me to get any more content out on my show. Yeah, I'm telling you, I've just been, oh gosh, like, I don't know what it is too, because if you look at any other kind of commentator, David Pakman, or something like that, like, sure, the world isn't turning out the way that they personally envision it, but they're still going to make content. They're still going to, like, bring it up and say, oh, this sucks, but look at that. So, I mean, if I'm going to do this show and I'm going to do it right, I have to, like, really fundamentally search down deep within myself and figure out what exactly it is that I'm doing. And you guys have helped me just kind of continue chugging along, because sometimes that's all you have to do. You have to just keep on putting stuff out there.
We need to build a movement. We need to have shows like yours and ours grow. We need to grow our audiences individually, and for that we need, the supporters. So thank you for supporting Seth very much, as well as for supporting moving forward. And we like everything Yang Gang. Let's keep it moving forward. Let's keep humanity first, on the table. Let's get the UBI caucus elected. If even just one out of the 40 people running for Congress, actually running for Congress, supporting Yang's platform right now. If only one of those people actually gets elected, that could be the AOC of this movement.
Yeah, it's a game changer. It really is.
Is it really though? Because part of the problem with UBI,
it is. Here's the thing: it's the difference between 8 years before UBI or 4 years before UBI.
I think it might be Jonathan Herzog. I'd like to have him on again, because I could see
Herzog's legit. Let's do it.
Doing it.
Yeah, he's got the chops to get it done, and he's following the math of his own thing in a way that I think could really work.
We should give that guy money. Go give money to Jonathan Herzog's campaign in New York. He's a very serious, qualified candidate. He supports Yang's policy platform, and he could be the next AOC. But for human capitalism instead of socialism.
It's not for socialism.
This will be like the last thing to bring up. But one of the problems of a universal basic income is that it can't happen locally. You literally, this is one of the few policies that you have to push through on a federal level.
But that groundswell of support and infrastructure and organization, and what the earned media that comes from that's part of this whole process, right? The UBI definitely has to be top down. I agree, but the groundswell is going to come from candidates that will not let it go. And create a voting block, right? Like that, 1 turns into 2, turns into 4, turns into 8, turns into the UBI caucus, having enough people to sway votes in the Congress. And it's a big mess after that. Like things start to get really interesting.
And humanity first is our Yang Gang gumbo.
Now I'm hungry. Thanks, guys.